Emma is on here as well. We will be recording this. We have some new members today. We got to meet them. Well, a couple of us got to meet them briefly on the onload meeting, and that was fabulous. Meeting etiquette, of course, please be considerate of yourself and others. And then meeting goals. Our goals are to move along bike and pedestrian, and of course, get along and not blow up too many things. So we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. We're just going to do popcorn style, which means you guys are just going to pop in and introduce yourself. First, we're going to go with the chair members, and then we'll move on to the ODOT. If by chance you are here and you would like to make a public comment, please put that in the chat so that we can call on you as we can. Remember, it is a 2-minute minimum for speaking. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and start. I'm going to throw Beth to the wolves. So there you go, Beth, you're first.
Beth Young, on the committee as the local and planning liaison or person.
Excellent. Lauren, would you like to go next?
Sure, Lauren Morris. I think I'm representing the environment, and I'm here in Coos Bay, and I will name Andre.
Good afternoon, everyone. Andre Lightsey Walker, he, him pronouns, member at large. I'm based in the Portland metro area. Dell.
Hi, I'm Del Scharfenberg. I represent, I guess I represent
Trails?
ORTAC. Yeah, ORTAC, Oregon Recreational Trail. And I'm here from Milwaukee, Oregon. And glad to be here today. And I'll pass it on to Emma.
Hey everyone, Emma Newman from Springfield, Oregon. I am one of your co-chairs for the next 61 minutes or so. We have a co-chair election later today on the agenda. And I just want to echo welcoming all the new members today. It's really exciting to have new people joining us. And I'll pass it to Dave, one of our newer members ex officio.
Hi everyone, I'm Dave Thompson, live in Bend, and yes, I'm a new member and apparently a new type of spot, so ex officio, and I'll be trying to bring some Central Oregon stuff to the table. Thanks. Oh, and boy, I'm not sure I know who's a member. Ryan?
I think Mike maybe is the next person.
Mike.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everybody. Mike Bork, brand new member, first meeting. I am the North Clackamas Parks and Rec District Director and also a Marine veteran and e-biker. And so I don't think I represent him. I just at large, Emma, is that, or Roberto? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just glad to be here.
Welcome.
Excellent. I believe that is all of the members, correct?
Isn't Ryan a member or no?
No, I see that Nolan, one of our newer members, he is unable to attend today.
Okay.
And sends his regrets. Hopefully we will get to see him in November. If by chance you are not a member, if we could have you turn off the video, because I know that my screen is having a hard time with everybody. And with that, can the ODOT attending please introduce themselves?
My name is Leanne Ferguson. I am the Strategic Investments Manager and am playing the interim staff facilitator role for OBPAC as we backfill a rotation that Jessica Horning's on rotation, and we're backfilling her position. So you guys will likely have a new ODOT face at the next meeting, but I will be here to help support while Jessica is out on her rotation. I'll pass it to Roberto.
Hello, everyone. Roberto Cotto, Active Transportation Program Analyst. In my role, I help out 3 different advisory committees over at the Public Transportation Division, OBPAC being one of them. I will pass it on to Stephanie Zellner. And the rest of our ODOT staff, you can put your name titles in the chat room. That way we can expedite the introduction piece. Stephanie?
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Zellner, and I am the Interim Policy and Implementation Manager with Public Transportation Division. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so it looks like we are moving on, and our next is public comment. So I did not see anybody in the chat.
I don't know if we asked. I know there was someone who wanted to provide public comment today. So if you're here and you want to provide public comment, can you let us know in the chat, please?
And Leanne, I'm going through the roster. Fran was supposed to do a public comment, but I don't see her here today.
Okay, we are going to wait on that agenda item. If they show up, Roberto, please let us know so that we can be cognizant of that. Moving on, we have the approval of the minutes from May.
Can we pause on the public comment for one more second to mention that there are actually 5 letters in your homework packet? And just want to make sure that folks were able to see that public comment and the response that ODOT provided. And just pause for a moment because we have a couple of new members to see if there are any questions or if there are any follow-up about those 5 public comments. Sorry for interrupting, Mavis. Do you mind if we do that real quick? Okay.
We're all good. Let's do it.
And I appreciate you highlighting that. I want to make sure that people have access. We do have a separate agenda item near the end of our agenda to discuss or respond to public comment if we choose to do so. Right now, it's just a question of, do you have access? Do you have the information that you need to have in front of you? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Great.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready? Already jumped the gun once.
I think you're good. Thank you, Mavis.
Okay. Let's go ahead. And Roberto's going to watch out for public comment, but we are going on to approving the minutes. So approval of the May 20th, 2023 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to see them? Opinions, anything we need to change? And yes, I'm looking for a move.
I move to approve.
And I will second.
Oh, Dell seconds. I will withdraw my second.
Perfect. Those in favor, please let me see a thumbs up. I'm seeing Dave. I'm missing a thumbs up from you. There we go.
I don't believe I get to vote, so.
Oh,
I think that is correct. So Dave is playing a new style of position that is possible due to an update in the I think the rule or the charter. I apologize, I don't have the exact language, but so he's an ex officio member who actually cannot vote. But since this group is changing to be more of a consensus style group, Dave's voice will be very important in during the discussion and providing some really needed input that the committee has identified, and then we'll work together for consensus. But Dave's correct, he does not vote. We love that you are here, Dave. Thank you.
yes, thank you. The parrot doesn't get to vote either. Okay, minutes are approved. Let's go on to division updates. I know that a lot has changed, so ODOT staff, take it away.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start, and then I think Leanne's going to cover the legislative updates for us. Okay, so good afternoon again, everyone. I am Stephanie Zellner, as mentioned earlier. I am new to the division. I'm the interim policy and implementation manager, and I'm here today on behalf of Stephanie Coons who is the interim administrator for public transportation and the appointing authority for the division now. Stephanie apologizes that she wasn't able to attend to formally introduce herself, but I wanted to make sure that you all know her name and her role at PTD now. And I'm sure she'll be able to hopefully make the next meeting. So speaking of the administrator position, want to make sure you know kind of the status of where that's at. So Leah Horner, who is our assistant director for operations, is currently in the process of recruiting for that position. I don't have any timelines at this point, but just know that that is underway. And we recognize there have been a lot of changes the last several months at PTD. So we want to first off, thank you all for your continued partnership during this time and all these changes that have been happening. As for the rest of the division staffing updates, including the administrator position, we have 17 vacant positions right now at the division, which is quite a few. About half of those positions are in some form of recruitment of the process at this point, and then the other half will be coming. In particular, I'm sure you're very interested in the bicycle pedestrian program manager position. And that is currently posted, and that is posted as a rotation opportunity for ODOT employees. And the job announcement actually closes this Thursday. So that is coming up soon. And then we'll be going through the interview process for that role. And that will be filled for the time period that Jessica is on her rotation. We also have a couple other positions I just wanted to highlight. The program services manager position is expected to be filled within the next couple of weeks. And then we also have our training program coordinator position that should also be filled within the next couple of weeks. So some of these recruitments are starting to really move forward and get these positions filled. And we understand that the importance of getting them filled and distributing the workload, because we have, quite a few staff that have taken on additional tasks. For Leanne, for example, who is helping to support this group. So we'll continue to focus on those vacancies and work to get those filled as quickly as possible. And also acknowledging that, of course, we will continue to support this committee as we have. We will continue doing that going forward. And then lastly, just want to thank all of you for everything that you're doing each and every day for our communities and for public transportation. And that is my staffing update.
Question, Stephanie?
Yes.
Could you please repeat the two openings? I got program services
manager,
and program training.
And the training program coordinator.
Okay, thank you. And okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay.
And I believe Emma has her hand up.
I just wanted to share with the full committee that Karen Criswell called me and after she departed the agency, and she wanted to voice her encouragement for the work that we do and appreciation for all that we do as a committee. So she's giving us double thumbs up and encouraging us to go forth and continue to create good changes and benefits to the state of Oregon.
All right. Moving on to the next one, the 2730 STIP engagement.
Right before that, I get to speak on two things, but before we move to the STIP engagement, I'll do the legislative update really quickly. So I'm gonna put in the chat the legislative update one pager. You're doing great, Mavis, by the way. We are ahead of schedule. You're nailing it. So I'm gonna do a quick legislative update from Kayla Hootsman, who is our legislative person who's out of town today. But she provided some talking points with me, and this is a really pretty several page report. The link is of what happened this legislative session, which was quite a bit. So I'll run through a couple of updates and then I'll pause and I'll do my best to answer questions, and I will write down any questions that I can't answer and get back to you after I consult with our legislative team. So highlights are the session wrapped up in June, and it was filled with a lot of uncertainty, but in the end, it was a successful session. ODOT's budget and priority bills passed. The ODOT budget, House Bill 5040, has a 12% increase over current funding levels to fund positions for our IIJA implementation, which is the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that passed year or 2 years ago, maybe. There's some small business program, as well as some equity and inclusion more added to ODOT's budget. Also, the DMV fee bill passed, House Bill 2011. It increases many common driver DMV fees to help recover the cost of service based on a cost of service study. The Small Business Development Program, Senate Bill 1048, passed, which directs ODOT to develop a small business development program to help increase the diversity of prime contractors and build the pipeline in for firms and skilled workers to add more diversity to that. The Transportation Omnibus Bill, House Bill 20099, passed, which was filled with some technical corrections, some DMV elements. It codifies language for an IGA with the city of Portland related to roadway cleanup. And it also made some changes in the Safe Routes to School program, which is where my past experience with PedBike and with OBPAC has been, was managing that Safe Routes to School program. And so I'm really excited about this one. So we were able to expand the radius of projects around a school that we can look at from 1 mile to 2 miles. So now we can build projects with that program 2 miles around the school. It puts our focus on, instead of focusing on K-8, we can now focus on K-12, so kindergarten through 12th grade, all the way through those students while they're in school. And we inserted some flexibility in the grant match, basically asking that the OTC be able to approve a lowered match rate for some grantees. So we're going to be working on some rule updates and some working with the OTC to help figure out what that means. But it allows us to go, allows more flexibility to reduce the match for communities that need it. And let's see, the interstate bridge replacement funding was included at the end of session bill package. So $1 billion commitment with phased funding intention for the interstate bridge replacement. And then a couple of other bills that you might find interesting are Senate Bill 5506, which includes $1 million for Great Streets, $3 million for Hall Boulevard improvements, $5 million for City of Bend, Hawthorne Crossing, and $250,000 for Salem streetcar feasibility study. There's also House Bill 2793, which establishes the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee, which I believe we might talk a little bit more about it during committee business. And House Bill 3409, which was a climate omnibus bill that includes a green infrastructure grant program. So that was a lot of numbers and words. I'm happy to basically copy and paste these notes into a PDF and put them in your meeting minutes, meeting folder, so that you can go back and look at it. The report that I put in the chat has the most information in it. And then looking forward, just know that the 2025 session will have a transportation focus as ODOT looks to put forward a transportation funding package. So already the wheels are already turning for 2025. And I'll be able to give you a little bit more of that budget information in the next presentation around the 27 to 2030 STIP, which is the statewide transportation improvement program. So you'll get a little bit more about like, why are we looking to put forward a transportation funding package in that presentation. But I'll pause there and see if there are any questions that I can help answer. Sometimes I like to call this stump the program manager, which would not be that hard in this case because I'm reading someone else's talking notes and I'm an interim person for this committee. So who wants to play stump the program manager?
Thank you for the report. Now do we get to move on to the STIP engagement?
Yes.
Perfect, let's do it.
So I'm going to share my screen. And I'll ask, are you looking at a presentation or a Teams chat? Okay, great. Presentation. All right, so I'm going to try to spell out as many acronyms as I can in this presentation for our new folks. So welcome Mike and Dave to Acronym Land, where I will try to spell them all out. I also might have some questions if I don't know exactly what the acronym means, and maybe folks in the chat can kind of help play this game to welcome our new friends to this acronym rich world. So the 27 to 2030 STIP development. STIP is Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. And it's kind of this big plan that we update that really tracks a lot of our projects and a lot of our budget. So what is the STIP? The Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. It really tracks our capital program funds. So our FHWA funds, that's Federal Highway Administration, as well as FTA, which I believe is Federal Transit Administration, and state funds. It tracks construction projects on state and local roads, public and active transportation programs and projects. So this plan tracks a lot of the work that ODOT does. What is not in the STIP? There's a couple of things that we do that's not. The state funded multimodal grant programs. So there is the STIF program, which is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, which is basically state funded transit. And then Connect Oregon are two programs that aren't tracked in the STIP. Maintaining and operating state highways fund to cities and counties, as well as revenue and administrative functions. So this STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, we plan for it in like 3-year chunks, and we're always planning for the next one. So the 24-27 STIP, we planned for 2 years ago. So we're about to implement that one, but the planning happened in the past. And for that cycle, the program funding categories were Fix It, to do things like bridges and pavement and culverts, safety to help reduce fatalities and serious injury, enhance highway, which is highway projects to enhance the highway system, public and active transportation, bicycle and pedestrian and public transportation projects and programs, local government programs, funding to cities, counties, and other priority projects, ADA curb ramps, which is our construction of curb ramps to make sidewalks accessible. And then other functions, workforce development, planning, data collection, and other programs. So all of these things were programmed several years ago, and they're just going to start getting spent in 2024 to 2027. So now is the time to plan for 2027 to 2030. So we're really planning for the future. The timeline for this process will be that the OTC, which is the Oregon Transportation Commission, will have discussions and public outreach May of this year through November. So this is kind of part of that process. The Oregon Transportation Commission will then approve funding allocations in November. And then project scoping and selection will begin in 2024 to 2025. And then public comment and the Oregon Transportation Commission approval will happen in 2026. So there's still a lot of process to happen as we plan ahead for 2027. So that brings us to funding challenges. So funding in the 2027 to 2030 STIP, Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, will be limited for these reasons. That the IIJA, the Federal Infrastructure and Jobs Act, expires in 2026. So we really need to allocate all the funds before that. So you're not going to see any of that money in 2027 to 2030. The State Highway Fund revenues are flat, and I'll show you some visuals and data around that. House Bill 2017 named projects, those will be complete. So a lot of projects were funded in House Bill 2017 that were showing up in the STIP, but those will be done and they won't have money associated with them anymore. So that will, the funding will go down. Funds shifted from the STIP to cover ODOT's operations and maintenance shortfall. We're having an operations maintenance shortfall. So we're pulling money where we can to cover things so that we can continue as best we can with operations and maintenance. ADA program costs will be at their peak. We're doing a lot of work on building those curb ramps, and it's ramped up over time. So those costs will be probably the highest they're going to be in the 2730 step. And rapidly increasing construction costs. Inflation is really affecting how much we can build with how much money. This slide shows how much Oregon federal highway formula funding gives ODOT. So the light teal color is the formula funding, that the federal funding that comes to us through a formula. The blue, the darker teal color on top. I'm really bad with color. So the darker blue on top of the light blue is shows the bump that the Infrastructure and Jobs Act gave us in the last STIP cycle. So so you'll see how after 2026 the funding kind of goes back down to a shorter level. So that's sort of what we're talking about, that funding decrease. Here's another couple of visuals for kind of why, kind of building our information base on why that's happening. Oregon motor fuels tax forecast comparison. If you look at the top line, that was sort of a forecast from October 2022. But things changed. So in October 2023, the forecast, you can see that it's significantly lower than what we were expecting. So that's one piece of bad news. Also the total gross state highway fund forecast, you'll see in the blue line was an April 2023 forecast showing those state highway funds, which are state highway funds, and then the adjusted for inflation is the orange line. So they're going to do a lot less than we thought that they were going to do, those dollars. This slide shows our state highway fund balance and our state highway fund balance with a 10% reduction. So we've been talking about this for a little while, and ODOT was charged with reducing our budget by 10%. So this slide, the bottom line is showing that even that reduction by 10% is not going to help us in the long term. It'll help us in the short term, which is great, but starting, our projections are starting at 2027, we're going to be in the red again, even with a 10% reduction. So not a great forecast. So this is describing a little bit more about the ADA curb ramp program and sort of emphasizing that it will be at its peak in program costs in the 2027-2030 STIP. This is one more visual around the inflation. So the FHWA National Highway Construction Cost Index from 2023 to today is just going up and up, and that tilt for how much it's going up is starting to get steeper in the last year or two. So we're starting to really, I mean, this just solidifies what we've all been experiencing, which isn't construction costs are up. This slide shows required funding by category in the 24-27 STIP versus the 27-30 base STIP. So this is kind of a confusing slide, but I think it's actually really helpful. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. The light blue color, the teal color is for the 24-27 STIP draft. So this kind of shows how much was allocated in the 24-27 STIP for each of these different categories, and PAT is public and active transportation. So that's sort of the one that we look at the most. And then the 2023 base color, that darker blue color, that's how much we have to put in that bucket to meet the minimum requirements that are required by law and statute and rule and things along that line. So we know we need at least that much, but it's still going to be less than the 24-27 STIP. So a reduction in funding. However, there will be some discretionary funding that can help fill in the gaps for some of these things. And that's what the Oregon Transportation Commission will be working on in the next couple of months, that discretionary funding that can help fill some of these gaps. So generally what happens is the OTC the staff and the OTC will work to create a couple of scenarios that they can then discuss and choose from that will help that the scenarios will be built around different funding priorities and policy direction. So the focus areas for the funding scenarios would likely be maintenance, safety, multimodal, and timely investments. So 27, 2030 outreach is to work with advisory committees, you all, and the area commissions on transportation, work with metropolitan planning organizations and other boards, have an online open house, and have public comment opportunities. So what folks are asking for is, given this information and the needs across the state, what are your priorities for investment in the STIP? And I believe I'll turn it over right now to Emma and Andre, because y'all provided sort of a draft letter as a jumping off point for what you would like to see in the STIP. I'll pause and see if there are any questions, but if we want to move straight into Emma and Andre, we can do that as well, but I'll be quiet for a minute and see. Yeah, Dave.
Hi, oh, sorry about my video there. Anyway, my question is that it looks like there was just a huge difference between the October 2022 forecast and the forecast early this year. I mean, I understand things change, but that just looks like somebody, totally upended the apple cart there somewhere. Any comment?
I can reach out to, well, I'll see if any other ODOT staff on here has any additional information about that slide, and I'll go back to it, but that will be one that I can follow up with you about if not.
Yeah, you went that one. Yeah. That one. How could we have thought in October that, we were going to have almost 700 million in motor fuels tax, and now it's, 50 million less. Of course, when you don't start the chart at zero, it does tend to make that differences look bigger, but still.
Dave, I will reach out to our finance folks and get back to you for some additional details on.
I don't know that that's necessary, I guess, but thank you. I'll take it that nobody really knows at this point in this one.
I want to know too, so let's do it.
Yeah, okay.
Andre, you or me?
You got it, Chair, my friend, please.
Okay, well, I want to say thanks to Andre for partnering with me on drafting up a letter so that we have a starting point today. In talking with Andre, actually, Leanne, if you could bring up the slides one more time, we wanted to ask one clarifying question before transitioning over to the draft letter. And it is regarding the chart with the unallocated. So it's a little bit further down in the slide deck.
This one.
That one. Yep, exactly. So one of the questions we had was, are there any funding constraints with the unallocated funds? For instance, are they motor vehicle, like are they fuel tax funds that can only be spent in the right of way? Or could some of those unallocated funds go to things like the Oregon Community Paths program that OBPAC oversees? Do you know?
I can say that in the past, the unallocated funds, I believe, were federal funds and did go to things like the Oregon Community Paths program, as well as 10 million went to the Safe Routes to School program. 45 million went to start a ped bike, the ped bike strategic program, where we were able to fund a bunch of ped bike projects on ODOT right of way. So I believe that the unallocated funds are federal funds. I saw that Marcia popped off for a second, or her camera went on for a second. So I'll pause and see if she has any clarification for what I said.
Oh, I was just nodding and agreeing with you, Leanne, that yes, it's federal highway funds that are in the STIP discretionary that we're talking about.
Yes. And those can go to things like Oregon Community Paths.
And they can be flexed into Federal Transit Administration funds as well. So that, and have been in the past. So.
Fantastic. Okay, that is more flexible than Andre and I thought it might be when we were drafting the letter, so we might want to make some adjustments, but I will walk through the overall approach that we took. So the question that was broached to us is kind of where do you emphasize within the focus areas? And our letter had said, just like the previous OBPAC letter for the 24-27 STIP, one of the biggest problems that ODOT is facing with funding in the STIP is that things are so siloed that it's trying to pit against one thing against another. And instead, what we're seeing as a committee as we travel the state, I think back to Astoria when we were up there in February of 2020 and hearing the challenges they had on the North Coast, all the way down to the talent project that we just toured this last May, is that projects are trying to cobble together funding from different sources to fund like a $15 or $20 million project, which only goes, a mile of highway on the state system. So our approach says, hey, instead of asking this framework question of, do you want A, B, or C, we're saying, how about having a program such as Great Streets, things that emphasize complete street multimodal design that achieve the safety goals, that provide access, that address the maintenance needs, are just more comprehensive than the current structure currently allows. So that's the overall premise for our letter. I know a number of you have looked through it and provided some little adjustments. I, with the new information, might want to expand our recommendation a little bit more to allow for things like the Oregon Community Paths, but I think that's open for discussion as a committee. We had kind of broached this recommendation of putting all the unallocated funds into the Great Streets program because of that intent to have the dollars be less siloed and more effective, really focusing on the common ground and co-benefits. But I personally would like to see that maybe expanded a tiny bit. Andre, what would you like to add before we open it up for committee discussion?
That sounds pretty spot on. I think just for folks that haven't had a chance, we did bold some of the key areas of discussion. And so use that as sort of a marker to ground ourselves in the following conversation. But that was great, Emma. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And for the letter itself, my hope was to keep the formatting so it's within the 2 pages. So that's one of the things I'm going to strive for as we make a few edits. And then Beth, to your point about perhaps not bolding, my preference is to bold. And one of the reasons we did that throughout the letter is to make those key statements stand out. The OTC in the past, when they've reviewed STIP discussions, have gotten thousands of pages of comments. And so if things aren't bolded, it's just like, oh, that goes to the bottom of the stack, not even going to look at it.
Yeah, great.
So opening up for discussion, questions, comments, recommendations on kind of adjustments to make.
My comment is I support it, and all my little changes do not change content in any way. They're just suggestions, but it's a great letter. Oh, also, we might want to address who it's from, because you have it as from the 2 chairs, the co-chairs. Did you want to address that, Emma or Andre?
Yeah, this was based on, I was taking that lead from how we've signed letters in the past, kind of having the co-chairs named specifically, but then putting the full Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee directly under that. So it's clear that it's from the committee, but it's signed with a couple specific names, so it's not completely vague. But I'm open to changing that. We just want something I think that is like relatively short so that it's not making it really lengthy.
Great. Then there was a place where it said we and somebody, it looks like so I exchanged it for OBPAC. I think I did anyway. It doesn't matter.
OBPAC wants instead of we want, or Oregon needs.
It doesn't matter. We don't need to wordsmith. It looks great, and that's a great reason. It's on our letterhead, so they'll know.
Yeah, I'll just accept that.
Do we need to vote on it? We
don't need to vote if we want to submit this. Yeah, and then the other piece is to select a spokesperson to go speak verbally in front of the commission at the September meeting, since that will occur before our next full committee meeting at the end of September.
You said you're gonna make a couple of changes to it, and also since Jessica's not with us at the moment, we're gonna.
She looks like she's here.
I'm here. You need something? What's up, Lauren?
No, you're not in your position anymore as the ODOT pedestrian bicycle program manager.
Correct.
So
So,
do we want
Anne, I'm
that?
hoping those two items that I tagged you on, do you have responses about the accuracy of the statement made, and then who we should be CCing on this letter?
Let me find that really quickly and see if we can answer those quickly, or if this is I apologize, I didn't see.
And Dave, I see your smallest carbon footprint comment. I would be happy to add in that list: cost-effective, accessible, low carbon, and healthiest forms of transportation.
I just think that carbon reduction rings a bell with everybody these days. And we've been beating everybody needs a safe way to get around message forever. And it seems obvious, but carbon reduction now has everybody's attention. So I think we should make sure we use it because that's what we do.
Incorporated. Let it be so.
I think that's a good point. And we're also looking, as far as the environment goes, we're also looking at how to deal with what we are already heading towards. There's, how are we going to manage the impending climate change?
So what I can commit to for the things with my name on it is that I think that they might, like, if there's a change, it might just be like 46% instead of 44%. And then the bottom, the names to CC, I think I can come up with those. If OBPAC would want to kind of just like approve it in general with sort of the note that staff might change the names at the bottom for other staff members that need to be CC'd, and that those numbers might change a little bit. Just give me a little bit of a chance to get that right. But I don't think it would change the letter substantively. So if folks are okay with that, I can commit to by the end of the week.
Thankfully, and it looks like Jessica already covered it, and we have edited it on real time.
Oh
right?
my gosh, thank you,
Yeah.
Jessica. In the wordy time that I spent. Anyway, y'all
All good. Yeah, the names at the bottom you can adjust accordingly. I think the only remaining thing that I see should be changed is this paragraph around the Great Streets program. We could broaden it to say OBPAC recommends a funding scenario that assigns all the unallocated funds in the STIP to ODOT's Great Streets program, off-street or Oregon Community Paths program, and other active transportation oriented programs, or something that like broadens it a bit. I welcome suggestions on the actual verbiage there, but I just feel like that's maybe a little too narrow.
I would say on the other side that being focused is good. I mean, if you generalize it too far, then it's just like, oh, we want more money for bike path stuff, right? But I think this first I've seen the letter, and I thought it was very direct and very specific in what you were asking for, which I think is good. I think adding community paths is good, but I think you want to hang on to that specificity and not get too general about what you're asking for.
I kind of had the same thought as Dave, as the specificity really, it changes the tone of what's being asked. You're either saying you want that unallocated to go to this one thing, or this broad, kind of reach of things. And if it makes a more compelling argument, I think, to be specific. Now, whether it's Great Streets or some other, I thought it was, good that one thing was identified. It was very clear that was, at least from the way that I read the letter, that was the priority.
So I'm seeing that we are feeling very content with this letter as it is. Well, with the minor adjustments, I propose that somebody makes a motion that we send the adapted letter. And that we choose somebody to go forth and present at that upcoming meeting after we figure out who's going to be our new people. So what do you say about that, Emma?
That sounds great. I appreciate the comments about specificity. To give a little bit of magnitude, it looks like there's around $300 million of unallocated funds. The Great Streets program, if you adjust for inflation a little bit, we're looking at about $10 million per application. So that's about 30 projects statewide that could be funded if all of the unallocated funds went to the Great Streets program. The Oregon Community Paths program, we just allocated 30 or 40 million. So that would also be significant if that was doubled or tripled. If we just concentrate on those two programs, it really will have a good and big impact. So I am going to accept the suggested changes in here in a moment. But I think the letter's basically done unless there's any dissent. So we can go ahead and move on that. Unless there's more.
I'll move we accept the letter as changed and amended and updated through our discussion.
I'll second.
All those in favor, let's see your thumbs. Opposed? Dave, I didn't see your thumb.
He's not voting again.
Just kidding. Okay, so we've accepted that letter and we will deal with who will be presenting it a little bit later.
I can also deal with that now, Nath, if you want. I believe the meeting's going to be in Eugene and I live within biking distance. So I'd be happy to go and speak if someone else wants to join me. That works as well, but I'm happy to be that person.
Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome. And I think Andre or someone maybe in the Portland area could be queued up for, what was it, November as the next one?
9th, I believe.
November 9th, I believe. Northeast Portland, maybe Gresham, Oregon City to be decided, specific location, but that will be the final decision. So I'm hoping I can cover the September one where it's local for me and then someone else can cover in November, but we don't need to decide that until our September meeting. I guess I move that I go speak in front of the OTC on September 14th or whatever date it is in Eugene.
I second that motion.
Looks like Emma, you're gonna go represent us. That's fabulous. All right, we have 10 minutes left for discussion. Anything else we need to do during this time period? Sweet. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead for our break. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. So everybody be back here at 1:56 on the dot. And then we will do some more committee business, work plan updates, and get somebody else to be the head. Here we go. See you in 5. if you're back, please turn on your video so I can see your smiling faces.
Hi, sorry, I was on the call and then not. I had to hop into a whole, like, I had to come pick up a forklift is what I had to do. So I had to run over to our warehouse. I was in the meeting and then I left, and then I figured I would hop back in just to listen along as I took care of some warehouse stuff. But what's happening with the meeting?
We are currently on a break and gathering everyone from the OBPAC advisory committee, Clint. It's the advisory committee who has the camera on and the audio. So if
Cool.
you can mute yourself and turn off the camera, we'll get started in a few minutes.
Can do. Sorry about that. Sorry for hopping in and not being able to see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, fantastic. So our next order of business is our work plan and co-chair elections. So Emma, am I understanding that you have decided you would like to step down?
Correct. Yeah, it has been a pleasure to serve the committee as co-chair and as previously vice chair. We changed our framework to be a little bit more horizontal structure. And I'm excited to engage a little bit more with some of the content-based items and create space for someone else to take on the leadership position of doing the prep meetings that Mavis and I would do with staff, kind of set the agenda and facilitate the meetings.
Well, thank you for charging forth. It's been very, very nice to work with a detail-oriented person. So I am willing to stay on as one of your chairs. However, this is an election, so that doesn't necessarily need to happen. So if we could go ahead and have I would like to open up nominations for chair and co-chair for our OBPAC committee.
I'd like to nominate Beth as a co-chair.
Thank you,
She's
my dear.
declining.
I think not.
You'd be so great at it.
Ah, thank you.
So was that an official decline?
That was an official decline. Thank you, Lauren.
Hey, do we have any other?
All right, I will rescind my decline.
All right, we officially have Beth is in the running. Do we have any other?
Mavis, do you need it to be official that I nominate you as the other co-chair, or do we
Yes.
just take that on good faith? Okay, consider
Yep.
yourself nominated then.
Thank you very much. So I'm in the running again. There we go. Just as a forewarn, I get to term out of this committee here in a couple of years. So this is my last time that I will accept said nomination. Anyway, anybody else?
Mavis,
Question before we go on. Okay, so what happens next year? Everybody, it's two new nominees, or it's two new nominees, right?
Correct.
Is it? Okay.
And we have it kind of set up as in, like, Emma was a chair, and then I came on to help her, and it was kind of a vice. I was the vice. And now I'll be probably stepping into more of the head position, and then whoever gets elected now, then they will be the vice, and hopefully it will go forward and they will be ahead the following year. But life happens, and sometimes people have other things they have to take care of. So
Okay, so I'm only committing to this year in
Yes.
essence. Okay, wonderful.
Emma, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was curious, Andre, if you're interested in co-chair position.
I'm not, thank you.
Come on, Andre.
I appreciate it. You're gonna be great, Beth. I'm excited to vote for you.
Thank you, Andre.
Awesome. That's all I had. Just wanted to check and see what interest there was.
Beth
Good idea.
or Mavis, you know, it's in your power to delegate too, so. You know, if you need help from any of us in your duties. Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, that is a good reminder. Do we have any others? Okay, I'm gonna lean on Roberto. Roberto, what's the process here? Because I know it has to be official.
I'm guessing just a vote. Roberto, you might be on mute if you're speaking.
And I can chime in for Roberto since I'm not sure if he was with us last July when we had our last election, but when we were in person, we would do like an old school ballot. But since we typically just have there's not much suspense in these votes. I think online you can just do a regular motion and vote.
Okay. So let's go ahead and call nominations to a close. Those of you that would like to encourage Beth to be a co-chair this following year, please let me see thumbs up. Perfect. Beth, you are a co-chair. Congratulations. Those of you that would like to encourage me to be a co-chair yet again, go ahead and thumbs up. Oh, fantastic. It's you and I, Beth. Let's take on the world.
We'll do great, Mavis. And thank you, everybody, for your vote of confidence. We'll see how this goes.
It'll go fantastically. Okay. Yes. Did you have something else, Beth? No. Okay. Okay, so network development and advocacy, the Scenic Bikeways Committee representation opportunity, jurisdictional transfer committee, and the representative opportunity. I'm seeing these here, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say. Emma?
Yes, I was just trying to pull up the email about the Oregon Scenic Bikeways. Essentially, it is OBPAC has opportunities for our membership to serve on a number of different advisory committees. We're all on OBPAC, but then there's the Scenic Bikeways Committee, for example. And so I believe that they need a new appointment. And I was just trying to find the email with a little bit more information, or maybe staff could fill us in on kind of what this entails as far as meeting frequency, locations, etc.
I can look up a little bit more, see if I can find what this entails. However, I believe Clint Culpepper is on the call and might have that information at his fingertips. Clint, would you mind?
Yes. Sorry for that interruption earlier. Yes, we are we recently changed the Oregon administrative rules to allow your committee to appoint a representative. So it does not need to be a member of the current committee. It can instead be a representative appointed by you all. The meeting frequency is quarterly. In addition to that, and they are at this time all virtual. In addition to that, time commitments can include, but do not need to include, route review, which is something where we take folks out and they review existing or proposed routes. And then there are also subcommittee opportunities as well. So in the past, Elliot Crowder has filled this position for you all when he was on the committee. He has expressed interest if there is no current member that would like to represent OBPAC. He is willing to act as the representative if that's something that you all decide.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate you answering the questions. Also not sure of the context, but like maybe we could invite Elliot to future meetings to kind of report back, or we could figure out a report back way if the committee decides to send Elliot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll comment on that. I know Elliot. He lives in Newport. He owns Bike Newport, and he's been a past member, as you guys might know. And I think he'd be great. And if you want, we can, to answer your comment, Leanne, Elliot and I could, you know, talk occasionally if he doesn't want to or doesn't have time to attend an OBPAC meeting. So it'll be a casual liaisoning. So
Looks like Dell's hand is also up.
Yes, I'm also a member of that committee representing ORTAG, and I strongly recommend Elliot continue to serve on the committee. And we do have representation from OBPAC by me now. So I just want to strongly support that. It's a wonderful committee to serve on. We're currently reviewing some changes to some of the scenic bikeway routes, and it's nice to have the ball rolling on this committee again after it sort of came to a stop during the pandemic. So I think things are looking pretty rosy going forward.
So I apologize, I missed this. So we actually do have, Dell, you're on the committee already. So we do have OBPAC representation.
I am, but we could...
Yeah, it was encouraged that we, instead of Dell representing both ORTAC and OBPAC, was recommended that each committee have its own representative.
Got it.
Right.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
And to give you, yeah, absolutely. And to give you some idea of what the interactions would be, a few of the reroutes that Dell was mentioning are safety issues that are being addressed. And so that's where we would lean on support from OBPAC and hope to receive any feedback that's necessary to make those improvements.
Wonderful. So as I see, we are going to, let's go ahead, and I need a motion that we move forward with Elliot as our representation, with, of course, Dell is already there as another committee member, and that we take both of their opinions into view. So I would love a motion for us to move forward with that.
I would move that we elect Elliot as a representative from OBPAC.
Fabulous. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Beth. All of those in favor of Elliot Crowder being our representative on the Scenic Bikeways Committee, please show the finger, not that other finger. Yeah, perfect. All right, Clint, you have a new rep. Congratulate
Awesome.
Elliot when you see him for me.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the work that you all do, and I know it's often thankless, so thank you.
Thanks. All right, we have another opportunity to represent with the Jurisdictional Transfer Committee. can you give us a little bit more information on that, Emma or Leanne?
I'd be happy to. How much information do you want, Mavis?
Short and sweet.
Little bit. Okay. So with the legislative update, Leanne shared that there was legislation passed to establish a jurisdictional transfer advisory committee. So this committee is being formed right now. The governor needs to have a list of people to appoint, to recommend, and actually appoint by about a week from now. So it is very timely that we're meeting and selecting a person to serve on the committee right now. It's going to be 11 member committee. There will be a full-time staff person supporting the committee. They'll be meeting about once a month, starting mid to late September. And they are 4-year terms, but they're about a little bit staggered with the initial appointment so that they're getting into a good cycle. Essentially, the purpose of this committee is to come together, develop application criteria and a portal for cities and counties to apply for a state-owned facility to be transferred to the local jurisdiction, or the local jurisdiction to transfer that street or facility to the state. And then there's going to be an outreach process to cities and counties to coordinate and encourage them to apply. Coming into the next legislative session, so every 2 years, this committee will be making a recommendation of 3 facilities and locations throughout the state to transfer, and funding associated with bringing up that facility into a state of good repair, but also adding multimodal transit, safety, really trying to improve our street systems prior to any transfers occurring. There's a whole lot more, but the short story is that they need a representative appointed by OBPAC. It could be an OBPAC member, or it could be someone that we choose. I have been in some communication with Representative Ben Bowman's chief of staff, who is helping compile a list of recommendations of people to appoint to forward onto the governor. And the overall process is just kind of stemming from a desire to have a more systematic approach to jurisdictional transfers. There's been transfers written into legislative bills here and there, but it hasn't been a clear system. So this is an effort to try to make it a bit more organized and consistent, and to also build the case for ongoing consistent funding from the legislature for these urban arterials where, people are consistently dying because it's an old highway, but then the community is built out along it and the street hasn't kind of grown up and modernized to go along with the land use changes adjacent to those streets. No funding specifically, but making recommendations to the legislature that hopefully will bring the funding along with those transfers. And I'm very interested in this topic, so I was trying to ask about, the split of different funds between ODOT, city and counties, and also the potential to integrate it into the Great Streets program. So those are kind of side conversations that will end up being part of the committee's work to improve overall systems to serve Oregonians' needs. That's my overview.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we have a lot of new members today, and I'm realizing that maybe we need to show a little light on actually what we're doing. So our work plan is what we want to do as a committee. And within that work plan, we have a multitude of different things that we're like, ooh, shiny, that looks really cool. I'll work on that. And so there's a lot of shiny things on our work plan. Anyway. And part of this process is we've been trying, since we are such a small committee, and we seem to be getting a lot of requests lately to participate, as we've been trying to either have other people report back to us so we don't have to physically be there, or that we go ahead and attend ourselves. So, so new members, what we're really looking at is your guys' interest in what part of the work plan do you guys find interesting you want to work on, and or is there something that you're seeing not on the work plan that you're like, oh man, I thought this committee, I was really going to get to work on this one thing. And so that's something that we can kind of finesse in as well. So at this point, we have been given an opportunity to participate with the scenic bikeways, which you just witnessed that we are, Elliot's going to be taking care of that and reporting back, and Dell will be there as well. And then for this next one that we've been giving an opportunity, it is the jurisdictional transfer. Now, as a bike shop owner, I know nothing and nor do I want to about this subject. So do we have anybody on this committee who would like to participate in this or have a good idea of somebody who would be the fantastic person that would really advocate and do a great job for this? Anybody? Emma?
Just did, but I want to hear if others are as well.
I
think
support Emma.
exactly. Yep.
I need pom-poms. Do we have anybody else other than Emma that would really like to have their name on this fine committee? Jill, is that you jumping up and down in excitement for this? That looks like a no.
No, I just keep knocking my camera off, so not good. It's sort of in line with my cursor, and I sort of think Dave Thompson might be good for this.
Do you know this individual, Emma?
Dave is our ex officio member. Dave, would you like to speak?
I think he's talking about me. To be honest, it's somewhat interesting, but as far as I know, there's nothing currently going on in Central Oregon around that topic. I know there's a lot of discussion in Portland all the time about getting streets back to ODOT and turning them into actual streets instead of highways, but I'm not very close to any of that. And Emma looks very excited about it. So, you know, I wouldn't want to step in there.
Oh, thanks, Dave.
I'll
I
pick
feel like this
something
is well
else.
positioned for, so those of you who are newer to this, I have had the last decade of a career working for local government, and I would bring the outside of Portland perspective of, is this process making it so that jurisdictions outside of Portland can even participate? Like, what are the barriers to access? How can we improve the system over time, and think about kind of some of the unintended consequences that the legislation may have created, but also opportunities to improve things going forward and really set it up well. So that's why I'm excited. It's kind of a way to establish something well now that will go on for years into the future.
Awesome. Thumbs up if you think Emma should do this. With that, Emma, you're it. Okay. On to the next. Updates from the modal chair and ACT and the OTC meeting. So that was me. I went to a meeting in, I believe it was in Salem, and they got all the ACTs. So the ACTs, there's 5 of them, I believe. Anyway, all these people from different regions, ACT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. No, there's more than 5. They got a lot of people together, and they said, hey, what are you seeing? And then the OTC said, well, this is what we're seeing. We're out of money. Yay. And then it continued to move on to, we're going to be looking for more funding in these different ways. Some of the larger, Andre, you'd be interested in this one. Some of the larger projects like the Rose Corridor, they have been kind of sidelined because they have discovered that though they want to, they don't necessarily have the money for those projects. So there are a lot of big things that happened in that meeting that were fantastic to hear. And then, well, not necessarily fantastic to hear, but it's much nicer for me to hear that this is the direction we're going instead of, oh my gosh, we're out of money. Some things that I came out of that meeting with is we, as OBPAC, we are elected from the governor. We are not necessarily OTC puppets, but we are with the governor. So the ACTs, they were there going, what does the OTC need from us? And so my question for you guys on this committee is, what does the governor need from us? Because I don't think I have ever actually answered that question for myself. I mean, I've been on this committee for a long time now, and I'm not quite sure what the governor needs from me on this committee. So that is a question that I'm just going to throw out there for you guys. And then another topic of information that came up during that meeting was making ourselves available for federal funds. And so I don't know how we can work that in as an OBPAC, but we definitely want Oregon, the state of Oregon, to be available to spend federal funds on bike and pedestrian advisory bike stuff and walking. So how are we in a good position for that, or do we need to change what we're doing? And then what else did I get out about that? Another interesting take I got out of that meeting was they're talking about the changing demographic in terms of people are no longer necessarily working, for example, in downtown Portland. They're choosing to work long distance. And so what does that mean for everyday commuting, childcare, and all that? So it's kind of changing our demographics within like the suburban areas or just all over the place. So that's another thing I think we kind of need to have on the horizon with how we as OBPAC are, how is that going to change things and how can we be proactive? So that just some things that came out of that ACT meeting. It was really, really interesting and great. One of the things that the other modal committees and I came up with. So the modals, they're like the train, the trucks, the bike and ped. We all got together in a smaller group on the side. And so I would kind of like to ask ODOT to put something together for the heads of the modal committees, even if we're going to the heads of the ACTS committee, that we have something like when they're getting together to talk about the ACT stuff, that we get together to talk about the modal stuff, because I got a lot of information out of that. But I didn't necessarily have the homework to sit down with the people that I think I needed to sit down with. I mean, I sat down with Leanne, which is great. And I think we solved all the world problems, but I think it would have been really nice to sit around the table with those modal people and really have some good conversation to get the flow going, so that we aren't putting modal against modal, because that's really not what we're here for. We're here for a system that works for everybody, not just one mode. So that's my soapbox. Do I have any questions? I see Emma's hand is up.
More of a comment and some historical context. So when Hal Hagedorn and I were co-chairs or vice chair and chair of the committee, we had a meeting with the other modal chairs. And I was really impressed in that meeting how there was so much common ground between the different modal committees. And so bringing that to today's action around the STIP, as well as the next few months through November, where OTC is going to make a decision around how to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it'd be really cool if the modal chair meeting that Mavis is requesting could happen in the next month or two. And there could be a discussion around what are the other modal committees, including the safety committee, what are they recommending for the STIP development for the 2027 to 2030 STIP? And can we all get as much as possible on the same page with a core message that we all agree to? Because I think that would be very powerful and better heard by OTC in the STIP development and funding decision than if we're all kind of bringing our own tune to the orchestra and kind of playing out of tune, but kind of similar enough. I'd rather it be coordinated if possible. So just an opportunity that I'm seeing between kind of modal chair coordination and funding decisions.
You got that, Leanne?
Yes, I heard there's a request to see if we can pull together the modal chair, the modal committee chairs in the next month or two to discuss the 2730 STIP.
Yeah, as well as potentially other agenda items, just connecting and saying, hey, what are the different committees working on? It could be broader than that, but I think that would be a helpful topic to connect on sooner rather than later.
I will see what I need to do to see how to make that happen, or at least follow up with the chairs to say like what the opportunities are to interact with other modal. I think my brain went straight to the details of like, it sounds like y'all want to create. Anyway, I'm too far in the details. I will follow up with the chairs on the best next step for that.
Fabulous. And it, I mean, even if it's just, we have decided to meet as acts. And so if it even ponies on that, it would be fabulous. Beth, you had something.
Yeah, some clarification. When you say modal committee chair, what are you talking about? The bike ped person on the ACT? What do you mean?
No, so when we were talking about the modal chairs, so you and I are modal chairs.
Oh,
So we are on a modal committee and we are the chairs. So we are modal chairs.
okay.
So yes.
Is it so that is that short for multimodal? Or is that what we're talking about?
No, because honestly, they're broken out into smaller groups. There's the transportation. Well, Leanne, I'm going to misspeak. So why don't you do this?
There's a public transit committee. I think the designation is that they're appointed by the governor to represent different modes of transportation. So OBPAC is the example of the bicycle and pedestrian committee. Then we have the transit advisory committee. And then there's the rail advisory committee, and there's probably a couple of other modal advisory committees that I'm not listing here, but they're governor appointed, and they're so maybe this was using sort of shorthand, like the modal committees, which I think ODOT uses that shorthand as well. We call them the modal committees.
Okay, thank you.
I believe freight is a modal committee, and that's one where it may be harder to find a lot of common ground.
And Jessica made a great point in the chat that each is connected to one of our modal plans. So ODOT has a list of modal plans, and there's a link to those in the chat. Thanks, Jessica. And the committees are all linked to one of the plans.
Yep, it's in the chat, and thank you. Yes. And I think if we were to all be on the same page or a similar page, and there's a lot more in common than you would think when you sit down with all these guys. They are not all appointed by the governor. Okay, thanks for that information. All right. So, having given you my little report.
The one other report out that that I know that y'all might want to do is I believe Beth attended a vulnerable road user meeting that you might want to report back in this section. Is that right?
I didn't attend it. I don't think we had a representative. Yeah.
Great. Oh, that's right. I will have a presentation later on in this meeting around that.
Perfect. Okay. Emma.
Yes, my only other update is that last meeting, I had an action item to talk with Karen Criswell about the mobility efforts, and Karen has since left. Mac Lind is the only remaining executive who I met with in the fall who still remains with the agency. So my plan is to meet with Stephanie Kuntz, Mac Lind, and some other PTD kind of staff to figure out, okay, given that 2/3 of the leadership we met with back in the fall has changed over, what are the next steps? So more action pending. I just wanted to make sure that you know that that's not getting dropped. It's just had some setbacks.
And we appreciate the patience and apologize for, like, there's just been so much turnover. So thank you all for your patience in this, and it's on Roberto and my radar as well. So we won't let this fall through the cracks.
Yeah, because that one's been a really long process. So funding programs.
Apparently I fell down on my job a little bit. Jessica usually reaches out to the people that whose names are next to all of these topics in your work plan and asks for any updates before the meeting so that we can update the agenda. And I did not do that. So if your name is next to any of these items on your work plan, I apologize, and please feel free to bring that up now, or we can move quickly through this section too if there aren't really any updates.
Or if new members want to assign themselves to a part of the plan, that might be a good question to ask, knowing that it doesn't have to be answered today.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to say we're going to kind of move on. Those of you that are new to the committee, please be looking at that work plan and figuring out where you really want to be. I'm going to throw out there that I have been covering the Safe Routes to School, and I have also been covering the OPRD grant. The OPRD, it's pretty intense. It's a 4-year thing, but it happens once a year where you have about a stack of things that you have to rate, and then you sit through about 2 days of presentations, and in the end you get, like, I got to give away $10 million of funding to parks around the state, and it is a very feel-good, awesome opportunity. However, at this point, my 4 years is up. So that is something that is going to be coming. So if you really love parks, which I do, but you can put your name on that one, and I can be taken off of that one. So anyway, those of you, yes.
Let's talk on that one. I'd be interested in that.
Perfect. Tag, you're it.
All right.
We'll put your name on it. And then, yes, new members, be looking over that. Moving on. Finally, do we have Bill Holmstrom? We're a little ahead of schedule.
Yes.
So are we ready? Are you ready for your presentation, or do we need to kill a little time and come back?
No, I think Teresa and I are both here and should be ready to go. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, members of the committee. My name is Bill Holmstrom. I'm a Transportation Land Use Planning Coordinator with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. DLCD is Oregon's land use planning agency. Work together with our local government partners around the state to implement Oregon's land use planning program. So I do not have a formal presentation for you guys today in terms of slides or anything like that. Honestly, I've been kind of slammed. We have our commission meeting this week, and so kind of been getting ready for that. But here, just to give a quick overview of some of the rulemaking that we undertook over the last few years and are in the process of making some tweaks and implementing at this time. I also want to introduce Teresa, and Teresa, I'll let you introduce yourself real quick from ODOT here.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Teresa Conley, a principal planner with the Oregon Department of Transportation Statewide Planning Unit, working closely with Bill and our partners at DLCD to implement the rules. And I'll give an update on some of those activities after Bill.
So just a real quick overview of what we're talking about here. We're talking about amendments mostly to the transportation planning rules, but also a few other parts of our rules that guide how local governments do coordinated land use and transportation planning. The transportation planning rules have been around for about 30 years, and tell local governments in Oregon basically how to do that transportation planning in coordination with other land use planning within their comprehensive plans locally. About early 2020, lots of interesting things were happening, obviously, in the world. But one of the things that was happening was we were given a directive by the governor to, along with a bunch of other agencies, to really work on making progress on the state's climate goals. And there were a lot of different pieces to that. And some of the pieces fell into DLCD's lap together with ODOT to advance our our goals, both for climate and equity, around the transportation system and the transportation network. The Oregon Transportation Commission adopted what's known as the Oregon, what's it called, the statewide transportation strategy, is that the right word? Which really laid out for ODOT and DLCD and other state agencies what the kinds of actions that we need to take over the next few years in order to meet the state's climate targets. We were working closely with ODOT as well as two other agencies, DEQ and Department of Energy, to work on coordinated state actions in order to implement that through kind of a 4-agency group called Every Mile Counts. This rulemaking came out of all of that work that had been going on for a couple of years at that point. And obviously, even before that, for the last decade, the agency's been working to get to do regional scenario planning and lots of different efforts to really move in the right direction in terms of making sure our transportation system and our land use system are lined up with the state's climate and equity goals. So this rulemaking, this piece of it is really about local coordinated land use and transportation planning and how that can support all of those goals, as well as local community goals. And there's a couple different pieces to it, but I'd say the big picture is every local government around the state is required to develop what's called a transportation system plan, which guides how local transportation system planning works. And that's been around for a long time. This was a substantial update of those rules for local governments within the state's 8 metropolitan areas. And our rulemaking, this piece of it was really focused on those 8 metropolitan areas. Those are the Portland metropolitan area, the Salem-Keizer area, the Albany area, the Corvallis area, the Eugene-Springfield area, the Middle Rogue, which is the Grants Pass area, the Rogue Valley, and the Bend area. So that's what these rules are really focused on, are those 8 metropolitan areas and the cities and counties within those areas, limited to within the urban growth boundaries of those areas. And the rules are quite comprehensive. They cover a lot of territory. I think of interest to this group in particular, we really wanted to make sure that we were focusing on prioritizing investments in the multimodal transportation network, including making sure that we're really looking at the pedestrian and bicycle networks, that they're connected, that they're safe, that they're at a level that's appropriate for the types of facilities that they may be next to. If there's motor vehicle facility that they're next to, that's going to be something that's compatible and safe and convenient for a range of users on that facility. So a lot of different pieces go into that. And that's kind of the 1,000 level or 10,000 foot view of things. I see some people out here today who are familiar with the rules. Your co-chair, Emma Newman, there was on our advisory committee. I really appreciate your time and effort contributing to the rules, as well as other folks who contributed out there. But I think I'm going to hand it over to Teresa here to kind of give her piece of it. ODOT is just a fabulous partner, helping to make sure that these rules are implementable and implemented and funding that. And so I'm going to let her give her piece of it before we turn it over to questions and comments. Thank you.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you, Bill. And I do have some slides, and bear with me for a couple of seconds while I see if my technology will work, or if I can figure it out, I should say. All right, can you see the screen? Okay, great. And I can see some of your faces, but I might need assistance if somebody has a question or something as I'm going along through the slides. So like I mentioned earlier, my name is Teresa Conley, and I'm with ODOT Statewide Planning. I was one of 2 new staff brought on to help implement the CFAC program. And I realized I have a typo in here, the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities program. Alongside me is Zachary Horowitz, who's been with ODOT for about the same time as I, and he is more of our technical expert. And as I go through the slides, I will describe a little bit of what he's doing, as well as some of our counterparts over in the climate office. And so while you might see me as the person talking about the program, or Eric Havig, there is a team around us, and definitely folks from PTD are supporting us as well with their expertise in public and active transportation. So let's see if I can get this Next, it always takes me a minute. There it goes. Okay, so in lieu of having an agenda with talking points, I have this flow chart that helps me visualize the flow of work and how the work that ODOT's doing to implement the rules interrelates with DLCD's ownership of the rules and the rulemaking process. And I'm realizing now there can be another loop around with the rulemaking because that's ongoing in response to local feedback and just refinements to the rules. So Bill gave a really good background on how these rules came about, and that feeds one of the first steps in implementing the rules is work that DLCD is doing on parking reform and the designation of climate-friendly areas. So that's one of the first pieces, and it's pretty important to have those set from the beginning because as I talk, you realize this really feeds into the transportation system plans as a foundational piece of work to inform those plans in the transportation system. From there, one of ODOT's first pieces of work is scenario planning. And as many of you are aware, and Bill alluded to, it's not a new piece of work, but it's one that's been bolstered by the CFAC program. And so there's additional work required throughout the MPO areas. And having that scenario planning complete is a key part that will also feed into and inform the transportation system plans, along with updated guidance for transportation, our TSP guidelines, and some data collection for a more robust multimodal transportation inventory requirements in the rules, and then updates that are needed to our more technical documents, the models, as well as the analysis procedures manual. And so my talking points will actually flow along similarly to this flow chart today. So one of the first steps in ODOT's implementation is picking up the scenario planning that's been underway for some time and the implementation of the statewide transportation strategy. The rules outline two different approaches depending on if an MPO area is a TMA or a non-TMA. For the TMAs, there's different levels of work depending on how much work has been done already. So the metro area has done significant work, and so there's actually no requirements related to additional scenario planning that I'm aware of in the rules. But this piece is really focused on bringing the Salem-Kaiser area up and the Eugene, Springfield, the Central Lane MPO area up to have a preferred scenario that's adopted and with performance measures and targets associated with those scenarios. And I would be remiss to not mention that this work is ODOT supported. I believe the contract was just issued notice to proceed. And there have been a lot of pre-conversations with these MPO areas on how the jurisdictions will work together to implement this work. And for the non-TMA areas, the Middle Road, the Albany, the Bend area, they'll really look to the statewide transportation strategy and pull out performance measures and targets from that work that's existing. And if they want to do more, that could be a conversation that would happen at that level. But this is what's required and planned for in the contract. And the climate office is leading this work. We have the project manager listed here, as well as the consultant team. Also on the really technical side is the update to the regional travel models, as well as the analysis procedures manual. A goal of this work is to work closely with DLCD as we are on all of these projects to develop updated guidance, particularly around increased emphasis on reduction of VMT per capita and any analytical procedures around that, and then how to update our models for the new climate-friendly areas to integrate scenario planning and some of the other new considerations coming about by CFAC. And there's a lot of close coordination with the next contract that I'll mention, the TSP guidelines, because there's that question of when something requires a technical procedure that needs to be documented versus is it more of a planning level conversation. And Zachary Horowitz, this is the manager for this project out of TPOW and one of the key CFAC staff people. Another key document that we're updating is actually an online document, the transportation system guide or TSP guidelines. And then more internally, we have the development review guidelines, and that's being updated more for ODOT staff, giving them guidance on how to do development review within the MPO areas now as a result of the rulemaking. So the more public facing piece is the transportation system plan guidelines. And we have a committee pulled together for this project, actually 2 committees, one for the DevRev guidelines, one for the TSP guidelines. There's also a strong committee structure pulled together for the prior project, the more technical analysis procedures manual project. And I can give more details on that if there are questions. So we're bringing the first deliverables to our committees on these projects. And one thing that we're noticing with the TSP guidelines update are these key changes. And this isn't new to you, right? Anyone who's familiar with CFAC rulemaking, much more robust and equity-centered engagement is required, integration of scenario planning into the TSP process, increased infrastructure inventory, which I'll kind of get to on the next slide with the multimodal inventory project. And then a requirement for a constrained project list that reduces VMT per capita. So a shift away from volume to capacity ratio as being the benchmark or the measurement, and more towards other measurements. And of course, integration of these new climate-friendly areas that are focused on walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented nodes or neighborhoods. And then there's another piece requiring enhanced review for projects that increase vehicle capacity. And Bill can speak to some rulemaking around that piece potentially if there's questions. But just requiring a second or more in-depth look if a project is looking to add another lane or some other sort of increased vehicle capacity. So this wouldn't apply to all projects. And there's a list of projects that are significantly underway already where this would not apply as well. So for example, if funding is already obligated, or if it's surpassed different NEPA review. So the last key project that I will highlight is the multimodal transportation inventory. As you're probably familiar, and I alluded to, the rules really step up the level of inventory required for for the pedestrian system, the bicycle system, as well as transit, and some additional data for the vehicular system. And so this project would collect the data as required in the rules for each, the UGBs within the MPO areas. This rule applies to the UGBs. It doesn't necessarily apply to the MPO area or MPO boundary. So I can talk more about the geographic bounds if you are interested. This project will produce an initial locally owned data set, and we will collect data that already exists, compare it with what is required by the rules, and then gather that missing data. So that way jurisdictions can hit the ground running with TSPs. We'll probably have the data ready in 2024, the first rounds of the data. And then another piece of this work would be talking with jurisdictions about a long-term data management solution. This project will not create that solution because that would be more of a IT project, and that was a whole nother can of worms that we cannot open in this project. But we're really looking at we're looking for a sustainable solution that will be maintained over the long term. So that's a key part of this project, getting partners together to talk about what that long-term solution is.
Teresa, are you open to? Yeah, go ahead.
I do see Dave pop up. Hi.
Hi. So I'm very interested in this data gathering for pedestrian and bicycling as well as transit. I think a huge problem forever has been that we do not have the same kind of statistics for bicycle and pedestrian travel that we have for auto travel. And so you can't do, VMT for bikes. You can't do accidents or crashes per X miles traveled or per hour for bikes because you just don't have the data, and it makes it so hard. And if this does anything towards establishing a standard for what that data ought to be and not just let each community decide what they're going to do to patch something together, that would be awesome. And I don't know if you're going there, but we need that.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I'll answer quickly. And then I actually only have a couple more slides, so maybe I'll blow through them and then circle back around to see if there's more questions or if there are questions for Bill. So a quick answer to your question. Dave, I think what you're pointing to is a need beyond the infrastructure. This project will really focus on what is our current infrastructure for the transportation planning process. There is a requirement for 5 years of crash data based on what we have currently. So you're pointing to a need for additional data collection on crash statistics, maybe, and also travel numbers by walking, pedestrian or bicycling modes. So I don't.
We need a way to measure whether these rules are effective. And if we don't gather data on how people are getting around, we aren't going to know whether we did a good job of trying to change the way they get around.
Yeah.
The old, well, I never see anybody on a bike, so clearly that doesn't happen, right?
Thank you for that input. And so this project won't get into that. I also see an opportunity maybe for the analysis procedures manual. And that's just me speaking off the top of my head. And I would want to bring in Zachary Horowitz to speak more articulately about that. I do want to note that we are currently in negotiations on this contract. So my talking points are pretty much the boilerplate of what's been shared in the RFP. There's a lot more to come on this. We hope to execute it in a couple months here. And so we'll have a lot more information that we can share publicly on this project. But I know there's a lot of anticipation, including within ODOT and at our partner agencies for this. Okay, so really quickly, the last program that we're standing up, well, for now at ODOT, is a new funding program to support all of the TSPs that will be required to be updated largely between 2024 and 2029. There are some caveats for jurisdictions in the Portland metro area or ones that have alternative dates or exemptions where they might not be confined by that time window. The program structure might be similar to the TGM program, although this is not an application-based program. We're creating a schedule for when jurisdictions will update their TSPs or with target dates, we'll say. There's a 15% local match, and we are really looking to be efficient. So we will be using the existing price agreement for at least the duration of that price agreement. And as with all the CFAC work, we're learning together, and this project is not set, or this program is not really set in stone. We have a really good framework, but we recognize that we need to be responsive to the needs of local jurisdictions. For example, if a TSP schedule needs to shift. And if people are curious, I won't get into it now, but we do have a schedule posted online, the draft schedule. And then, so some key takeaways for a CFAC implementation, going back to what Bill shared earlier, scenario planning and other work has been underway for quite a while around the state, and CFAC is working to bring significant changes both to meet our greenhouse gas reduction target statewide, but then also towards other statewide goals. And as a result, we'll see a whole round of TSP updates beginning in 2024. So that's pretty exciting for local jurisdictions. Exciting in different, in lots of ways. It's a lot of work for all of us. And here's some contact information. And then I'll just stop here and stop sharing my screen so we can have a conversation. Were there any other questions?
Thank you.
I just point out as a point of interest, there was an editorial in the Bend Bulletin this morning about the state forcing the city to reduce vehicle miles traveled in total. And the responses, of course, were that while even the Bend Bulletin's outlook was that's impossible with the number of people moving here. But they totally missed the per capita. And so it just went sideways. Sorry, I just had to throw that in.
Basil?
Yes, this is Basil Christopher, ODOT Bicycle Pedestrian Program in Portland. Teresa, for the inventories, the infrastructure inventories, will there be funding as part of that for local jurisdictions to be able to do those inventories, or do they include an amount for those inventories with like a TSP funding, TSP update funding request?
Good clarification. The multimodal inventory project is intended to collect the needed data at a statewide or MPO statewide scale to then be used in the TSP update. So we see that as providing a service to those jurisdictions and then also an efficiency doing it statewide. And so the local jurisdictions may not need to collect any data. A key part of this project will be coordinating with all of the impacted jurisdictions and regional bodies who might own or have an interest in that data and have a conversation about what that data collection looks like, the level of engagement or input from those jurisdictions. So a little bit of that's TBD, but as a result of the project as it kicks off. But the intent is we'll gather that data and it will be used for the TSVs.
Would that public awareness part of the collecting inventories be shared by the local jurisdiction, or will the program have that availability to anybody interested in knowing that? I asked because I recently asked City of Tigard about a sidewalk inventory. I didn't get a response, but I assume they don't have one. But if it's not collected by the city, how do members of the public access that information when they just want to take a look?
That will be a result of the project conversations, the long-term solution. So we haven't defined what any sort of interface will look like, the different ways to access it. That will be developed through the project.
Sounds great. I'm glad that is part of the plan, because yeah, I agree. Inventories are needed just to help with assessment, right? Where gaps are and things like that. So.
Thank you. Emma?
Thanks. Hi, Teresa. Thanks for all the emails back and forth. And it's good to actually see you in person, even though we're not in person. For a little bit of historical context, I'm putting the link to the OBPAC letter on the topic of the pedestrian and bicycle modal inventories. And I just want to say thank you to ODOT for ensuring that all of the area within the metropolitan areas are being inventoried so that we don't accidentally have gaps in neighborhoods that, underrepresented populations are living in because they're not close to a school. So I'm really glad to see the progress with that piece of this. I could talk about this topic all day, but I'll just leave it at that, saying thank you and nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. And for clarity, we did have some emails back and forth, Emma and I, good to see you in person, about there are some nuances in the rule on, collecting data within a quarter mile of schools, within CFAs, and the geography that will be covered. So it won't necessarily be the full MPO area. I want to be clear on that, but within the urban growth boundaries of the MPO where CFAC applies and where the TSPs will be implemented. And the multimodal inventory project will collect the data as required by the rules. There are some musts and shoulds in there, and I think that'll be a key part of the conversation too on this project on the data being collected. So that will be something that we can continue the conversation on. But the data collection is for the data as required within the UGBs.
Great, thank you, because the rules don't require the complete set. So I was really glad to see that it's not because what you said, where the data from the inventory is going to inform the planned projects. It would be really sad to see gaps in the system to not achieve what Bill said early on of really want ped and bike networks that are connected and safe, and specifically serving neighborhoods that need it most. And some of the rule language doesn't necessarily require that. So I'm really glad that this effort with implementation is helping bridge that gap.
Beth?
Yeah, I second what Emma just said. And question just on how these two work together. And I need to do some more homework on this, but you're doing the multimodal inventory project, and how does that relate to the analysis procedures manual?
So one key nexus, and I won't get too into this because we're in negotiations right now, but in the advertised RFP, there is a task for the level of traffic stress. And so a key connection there is this methodology actually lives in the analysis procedures manual. And so there needs to be a conversation about this data collected, how can it inform the current LTS methodology for walking or biking, or is there a refresh? Just having that conversation. So that's one key nexus. Another key nexus would be the APM and the model obviously use data input. So, and I'm not a modeler or I'm a planner, so I won't speak too fluently on this, but how this data is then fed into those tools to update them to be more accurate for CFAC. So those are two things that come to mind quickly. Other technical folks on this call might have additional ideas.
I'll go on a little bit. Just the analysis procedures manual is online, I presume.
I should just not unmute myself or mute myself. Yes, it is. I could put a link in the chat. It's a quite a lengthy document, but yes, it is online.
Okay. I'm just wondering if OBPAC in the past has had any input on that.
So I'll speak really quickly to the committee structure that's supporting that project. It's extremely technical, and we have some existing groups around the state. One is the Oregon Modeling Steering Committee, and the other is the APM Users Group. And so those existing bodies are being tapped for their long time expertise and input into those tools or documents. There is additionally a technical advisory committee that's been stood up to then provide another layer of input from different bodies who might not, different people who might not be on those other existing committees. And I think because it's such a technical document, we are pointing more towards those technical experts to provide input. There is, we are providing information. We will be providing information on the projects as they're ongoing and as deliverables are ready on our website. There'll be higher level. There's a different level of public input and engagement for these technical pieces of work, unlike a transportation system plan down the road.
Great, thank you.
All right, do we have more questions for Teresa or Bill before we let them go? All right, thank you very, very much for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, it looks like we are seven minutes ahead of schedule. Oh, Leanne.
No, that was clapping for the presentation. Sorry, it looks like the hand raised. We are 7 minutes ahead of schedule.
We are 7 minutes ahead of schedule. So we are, let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break now, which would be at 3:13. We should be back. See you then. Okay, wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. For this next little segment, we are focusing on safety. So we were invited to the vulnerable, I always say that one wrong, road user assessment. We were they wanted us to be there and we couldn't because it was just not in our bandwidth. So they're here to tell us a little bit more. Just for the new members of the committee, I know that you guys already know this, but the numbers lately have not been going in the direction we want them to go. There are significantly more injuries and deaths of walking and biking individuals. It's gone up an insane amount in the last 2 years in particular. So they're trying to fix this. So I'm going to hand it over to Heidi and Jessica Horney. So here you go.
Yep. And I think we might switch things up a little bit from how they're shown on the agenda and have Heidi go first and have like 10 minutes with you. And then I'll go through kind of the newer program and safety assessment work. If Heidi is back from break.
I'm back.
All right.
Hello. Do I show my slides or is there a master slide?
Please show your slides. Roberto's ready as a backup in case they're not working, but I think
Okay,
if you can.
I can. Let me make sure I do the right screen. Hang on a second. Hold on. Okay, can you see my presentation? Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for having me here today. My name is Heidi Manlove and I work in bicycle and pedestrian safety, also the micromobility realm. Basically anyone who's walking, biking or rolling at ODOT on the behavioral side. And so I'll get into a little details about that, what that means. I have 10 minutes, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview, a little bit about what I do and some of the projects I work on. And then I can come back at a later date and flesh out anything else that the committee is working on or would like to know more about. So I work, my office is the Transportation Safety Office. We used to be our own division, but now we are a service office of the Driver Motor Vehicles, DMV. And my focus, I'm one of 9 program managers who do similar work to me, but my topic is specifically related to people walking and biking and rolling. So just a little brief overview of what I do. I come from an academic background, focusing on public health and medical anthropology. So I come to this position thinking a lot about community health and community programs and really interested in like developmental trajectories of behavior and how what you learn early in life and are exposed to really has a big impact in your behaviors later in life. And so I'm really particularly interested in Safe Routes to School programming, which is a large part of my work. So I do multiple things here. Just a brief overview of some of the touch points I have with ODOT. Largely I do grants management. So I manage federal funds through the bicycle and pedestrian program, as well as the Safe Routes to School education program. I do program development. So I develop ideas and ways to expand the program of doing education and outreach to the public. I develop and update education materials, which I'll show you a little smattering of some of the stuff that I work on. I also work on state safety messaging campaigns, which I'll show you a little bit about. And these are oftentimes on transit ads, as well as streaming on TV, in the theaters, social media. And I like to collaborate with other agencies when possible. I also serve on multiple committees that have anything to do with vulnerable road users, people walking and rolling in the state. And then I largely work on partnership development. I'm really huge on working with folks, especially ones who are maybe not necessarily traditional partners of ODOT, to try to build more coalition work around this important topic. So I largely, like I said, work on administering and managing local and statewide grants. So an example of a program that I fund is the Oregon Friendly Driver program. If you're familiar with this, if not, you can see our website. We offer free courses and train the trainer courses to folks to learn how to some best tips and behaviors of how to ride in or drive in Oregon, basically with people who walk and roll. So it, in a way, teaches people who are driving beyond what they learn in driver education, and more about the laws around people, pedestrian and bicycle safety, but also to just how a day in a life in a person's shoes who is walking or bicycling and may not be driving. So we offer this to businesses who have folks who drive vehicles as part of their fleets, driver education courses. So classes large and small, and it's free. The courses are free, and we offer an online course. So these are just examples of some of the work I fund. I also fund police overtime grants. So I often work in on a triangulation of efforts. So some through education and outreach and engagement, and then also through police enforcement. So we know that there are a lot of challenges and barriers to people walking and rolling, and one of them is behaviors of folks driving. And so we fund police enforcement grants that specifically focus on largely pedestrian safety, as well as some of the enforcements are on bicycle safety too. Another example of some of the grants I fund are really small grassroots projects. And these are really fun because we get to partner with people who may not necessarily be traditional partners with ODOT. So smaller, like the Slavic Community Center in the Portland area, or Anson's Bikes in the Hood River area. Also, I work on the Safe Routes to School program in the education side. So this program is really a program with competitive grants that we do every 2 years, but we also provide statewide technical assistance to the entire state for anyone who's interested in Safe Routes to School programming. We offer a lot of free resources and webinars and things like this. We partner with Alta Commute Options, Cycle Oregon, and the Street Trust to deliver this. And then I also work with multiple partners to develop statewide messaging. You may have seen this last campaign recently, the school for Safe Routes to School. School routes are everywhere, drive like it. So here's just an example of some transit stop ads with that you may have seen in the last few years. And for our Safe Routes to School program, we have our newly revamped Jumpstart program. We have purchased multiple bikes, like 3 bike fleets, I think right now, plus our old one. And we have a few new trailers. And so we're offering a Train the Trainer program for any staff at schools that want to learn how to teach kids how to walk and bike safely. We train the teachers, and then we also offer the loaner bike fleets to train the students on after we leave them. So we leave them with a drill guide, and it's all free. And we work with our partners to work with schools and coordinate this. So this is a really exciting new effort. These are just examples of some of my recent pedestrian safety campaigns you may have seen on social media, and the focus of really looking out for each other and having this positive reinforcement of behaviors that we are all part of the transportation system, and not focusing on us versus them and who's doing right behaviors, but just that we're all participating in the transportation system in the safest way possible. Here's some examples of my bicycle safety ads we've had recently. We just had a new PSA come out over the summer, and I work a lot on any kind of new legislation that comes out, educating folks. So recently in 2020, our Stop as Yield law passed, and so I work to develop some educational tools around that. And I'll also be working on the newest legislative Senate Bill 895 that just passed. So we'll be working on developing education materials around that. And let's see. Oh, yeah. I also develop all sorts of guidebooks and tip materials that you can order for free on the website. And I'll put a link to that. They can be ordered out of our ODOT storeroom for free. And we have them in most of our materials are at least in English and Spanish, and some are in other languages as well. This is something I collaborate with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager, most recently with Jessica Horning. This is our baby that we work on to update, and this is the companion to the driver manual. So this is the Oregon Bicycle Manual, and this is given out by lots of different people in lots of different spaces in the state. Here's just an example of some of our Safe Routes to School education materials that we offer. Coloring books for kids. These are given out through our coordinators at schools. We develop our curriculum for our bicycle and pedestrian safety for practitioners and educators. And just recently, within the last few years, we've really branded our Safe Routes to School program around Strider and Viv, who are superheroes through a comic book series. And these books are given out to kiddos doing walk and roll events and as incentives, but they're also unique learning tools for both parents, adults, and community members as well. So we're working on our fourth one. Our third one, it just came out. So that's been a fun addition to our Safe Routes program. And lastly, just noting some of the committees I work on. I work on our ADA CQCR work, which is the comments, questions, concerns, and requests, I think, group. And so I'm the representative for the Transportation Safety Office on that. I also work on a few different alternative device groups as a part of that subcommittee member. I work on the Transportation Research Expert Task Group for ODOT research. I'm also working on the Vulnerable Road User Assessment that Jessica will be summarizing for you. So it's just a real quick introduction to some of the work that I do here at ODOT, and I'm happy to come back and hang out with you guys more. That's it. Let's see if I can stop sharing.
Mavis, you're muted right now.
There we go. So I get to see Heidi quite a bit at the Safe Routes to School, which is another thing that somebody can jump on if they want. Do we have any questions for Heidi before we move on to Jessica's portion?
Did I go over my 10 minutes?
We were ahead of schedule. You're doing
Yay.
great.
Okay. I tried to get it all in. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and it's been nice to see your project has expanded very much. And I think it's really got some Shazam to it at this point. So
Thank
good
you.
job.
Thank you.
Hey, Mavis, I just remembered a question I do have.
Okay.
Which one is Senate Bill 895? That's a question for Heidi.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that that allows a person driving to pass a so-called obstruction on a on a double yellow or a non-passing lane. And so this will be kind of in addition to the PSA we just released on giving space. So this will be really important in terms of educating folks that they can pass a person who is riding when there is a solid yellow or a double yellow line, but they need to do it with caution and give space and all those other things as well. So it'll be really important to get those materials so we can educate the public. And this will also involve me working with the folks who work on the driver manual to update those kind of education materials, and also the driver education program manager to make sure that the driver education instructors are aware of that law. And now
Good.
also too, working with law enforcement and training them.
Perfect.
So lots of fun education opportunities to come with that.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Any other questions for Heidi before we let her fade into the background? So Heidi, at some point, I would like to pick your brain about everybody's mental capacities and how that is affecting driving and walking and biking and the whole schmattering, because I think you probably have a very interesting take on the whole thing. But now's not the time. So Jessica, you're on.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. And I hope you don't let Heidi fade into the background, because I think it's really awesome that she's here sharing all of the great work she does with you all, especially as we're bringing on new members, so that this group tends to focus a lot on the engineering and the infrastructure funding. So hopefully we can bring her in more to make sure we're getting multiple E's, which is part of what I'm here to talk about, basically give my first report back on my rotation that I've been in for about a month and a half now over in the traffic roadway section of our delivering operations group. And first thing you may notice is that on your agenda, there's some different terminology being used. So one of the things, in addition to some other discussion points I have for you all, is this what was presented to the OTC as the Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Action Program. We have some issues with that acronym already being too darn similar to other programs that we have in the ped bike realm at the agency. So we're looking for a new name for this crash response program. But my game plan for today with you all is to show some numbers around what Leanne had said in her intro, or Mavis had said in her intro about the trends that we have in the safety front for newer folks, and then give a real quick overview of two different but very complementary efforts that our ODOT is working on to try to address those trends. So that's the Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment and our new crash response program. Like I said, these are both stemming from these trends that we're seeing both nationally and in Oregon, which is unfortunately that while fatalities had kind of leveled off in the transportation system, and for motor vehicle occupants, they have begun rising again, and in particular, the proportion of fatalities that are vulnerable road users, which is a term that we use generally for people walking, biking, vulnerable because they're outside of the protection of a motor vehicle. That proportion of fatalities has increased, particularly in the post-pandemic years. And then when we look even closer at those numbers, those crashes are involving vulnerable users are happening and impacting parts of the state where we have more low income and BIPOC community members, even more severely than areas of the state where we have more white and higher income residents. So that is something we want to try to address at the federal level. In 2023, the vulnerable road user safety assessment is a thing that all of the states have been tasked into completing to look into what's causing these trends more and commit to actions to address it. So, like I said, all state DOTs are required to complete a vulnerable road user safety assessment by November 15th and have it approved and incorporated into their strategic highway safety plan. And in Oregon, because we like to give everything our own special names, we call our strategic highway safety plan the Transportation Safety Action Plan, which OBPAC has been involved in reviewing and helping to develop the latest update of that. This new requirement is part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in 2022. So this is one of the non-funding related requirements that was in that bill. It must follow specific guidance that Federal Highways has provided on what is included in that assessment. So we're having big conversations about what we want to do and where we want to see this work go in the future, because we're going to have to do updates. But for this initial quick timeline that we have to meet by November 15th, we're pretty much going to be making sure we meet those requirements that Federal Highways has laid out that I'll go through. And just so we're all on the same page with what we're talking about when we say vulnerable road users for these efforts, we are talking about people walking, people biking. In crash data, the terminology is on a personal conveyance, but that's if you're on a scooter, using a mobility device, anything like that. And we're also talking about workers in work zones. We are not for this talking about people who are driving motorcycles, which or elderly drivers. Some different applications, we do use the vulnerable user term to cover those folks, but not in what we're talking about today. So the 5 components that Federal Highway Administration guidance requires we include in our vulnerable road user assessment are an overview of our safety performance in this area. So this is really going to build on and update a lot of work we've already done for the state of Oregon in developing our Transportation Safety Action Plan. In 2021, we did a ped bike safety implementation plan that looked at updating what are the risk factors for ped bike crashes in Oregon, and some work that we've done with the All Roads Transportation Safety Program and recent research on equity and pedestrian crashes specifically, and an update to our social equity index, which is a compilation of census data that ODOT uses to identify what are areas that may have experienced historic disinvestment or have more vulnerable populations living there. So we're going to be building on that work as part of our safety performance analysis. Then we need to do some more quantitative analysis in this in this report, specifically identifying high risk areas for pedestrian and bicycle crashes. And we have some flexibility around how we define that. And that's one of the things I want to discuss with you a little later. We need to consult with communities where high risk areas are located and have a summary of that consultation in our final report, and identify projects and strategies to address the crash risk factors in those high risk areas. So those are the key components, and all of this we are being instructed to use the 5 pillars of the safe system approach, which I think we've introduced a little bit in OBPAC, because it is the approach that the Federal Highway Administration is really pushing, and that ODOT has adopted as the safety approach in the new Oregon Transportation Plan that OTC just adopted. But really, this is kind of the evolution of the Vision Zero towards Zero Deaths approach that is looking at managing kinetic speed and vulnerable human bodies, and by not just looking at infrastructure, but looking at how everyone and all elements of our systems have a responsibility and a role in creating safety. So both safe road users, that human behavior that Heidi was talking about and really focuses on, safe vehicles, speeds, safer roads, and then also post-crash care. So that's the lens that we're going to be looking at for those projects and strategies. So to clarify the projects and strategies that we need to include in the vulnerable road user assessment, it's not going to be like the STIP, our State Transportation Improvement Program, where it's specific projects in a specific geography. It's going to be more focused on strategies that we know are successful and want to focus on to address our high crash risk areas. So those could be infrastructure countermeasures that we know from research reduce the likelihood of crashes by a high percentage. So we call those a high crash modification factor. Like when we do a road diet, we generally expect about a 30% decrease in crashes when we do that. So that's its crash modification factor based on the research. We also will be looking at some behavioral countermeasures, and we have some good resources that Heidi and her team work with quite a bit from the National Highway Traffic Safety Association on human behavioral countermeasures that we can focus on. And then we also have flexibility to look at new and different approaches as well. So we're doing, like I said, we're doing all of this very quickly on this first go around to meet our November deadline while trying to engage folks as much as possible. So we just wrapped up that June 30th workshop that Beth, I could have swore you popped in for part of it. But maybe Beth is secretly with me everywhere I go.
I don't remember, Jessica.
So we just wrapped up that workshop where we explained what the assessment was going to be and had a really great discussion with a variety of external partners and internal partners around each of those 5 pillars of the safe systems approach and how we might want to incorporate them. And I'll be back here at OBPAC in September, providing an overview of our rough draft of the final assessment, what we are finding in terms of high risk areas and thinking about for our program of strategies. And that draft is going to be available for OBPAC and other partners to review the day after the September 25th OBPAC meeting. So we'll also have a hard copy of that so that you can create a working group to provide comments on that if you like to. And then at the end, OTSC, our Oregon Transportation Safety Committee and the Oregon Transportation Committee are going to have the final review before we we call this done. So discussion items, the things that we're working on, and would really love your thoughts. Anything that we can add to what we got as feedback from the partner workshop are really around how do we define our high risk areas. We have flexibility on how we define risk, whether it's looking at crash severity or crash frequency or a little bit of both. And we have flexibility around whether that is going to be specific locations of this corridor and this intersection, these are our high crash areas, or kind of a more general facility type that we want to focus on, like urban arterial intersections. We know have a higher frequency of vulnerable user crashes. So maybe that's what we want to focus on with our strategies. And then just wanted to also get feedback from you on if there are any strategies that you've been hearing about or have experience with that you really would like us to look into for that program of strategies that we have to create. So that's my first big block of talking, and I'm gonna zip it for a bit for any questions or thoughts on these pieces we're working on right now. Dave.
Thank you. So I think one of the things when we're defining high risk areas is we need to be careful to not exclude areas that are high risk, but that people just don't use for walking or riding because they're viewed as such high risk. And so I guess maybe that comes into areas, but I think we need to be especially careful with that around areas that have a lot of underserved population, and make sure that we're not missing places where they really need to be able to move around and are really afraid to. So my thought.
Yeah, I think that's part of why we're making sure that we're incorporating the risk factors of where there might not be people walking now, there might not be crashes that we've seen, but we know just based on how this road is designed that they're more likely to happen there, and if they do happen, more likely to be serious. So that's one way we're looking into that, but I think there's other ways we can look into as well.
Might be interesting to ask if we had a way and say, where would you like to be able to walk to that you can't? And in Bend, we're seeing an issue like with Highway 20 heading east through Bend, that as the traffic volumes increase there, it just becomes harder and harder for any road user to cross that highway. You know, there's blocks where you're just taking your life in your hands literally if you try and cross the street. So lots of opportunity to work. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Del, I think you were next, and then Emma.
Yeah, thanks. You've really hit on a can you still hear me? I accidentally switched screens here. You hit on a really hot spot with me. I see on my 12-mile bicycle commute every day, I see a lot of very unsafe driving. Friday morning when I was riding to work, Barber Boulevard was closed because of an overnight fatality. Due to speed racing on the streets, it seems to me that no matter what we do, if we have so many individuals out there who are totally disregard any rules we have, there's no way we're going to make it safe. And I don't know how we can start enforcing some laws, but I think enforcement would be a huge key here. And ever since we had the defund the police movement, enforcement has been extremely lax. There's more and more street racing, especially in the Portland area. There's these huge street takeovers where the police can't even get in there and make the people stop. And there's fatalities every week. And this is mostly motor vehicles, but too often vulnerable users get caught in that mix. Just last week, another person got mowed down just sitting at a bus stop waiting to get picked up by a bus. They weren't even doing anything. They weren't walking, they weren't biking, they were just sitting there waiting for the bus. And these fools that are speed racing on the streets basically don't give a damn, they're just out there. And I think the number one thing we do is do some enforcement. Confiscate these vehicles, take them to the masher and get rid of them. Put people in jail if that's what it takes, but definitely speed up the enforcement. I mean, we can spend millions of dollars on making streets safer, but if you have people that disregard any common sense and any laws out there, it's not going to help. So from what I see, Vision Zero has just been a joke, at least here in the Portland area. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yep, I think you're getting at why that safe systems framework is important for us to look at, because there's so many different elements of the human behavior and the infrastructure, and enforcement is a tool that ODOT doesn't have a direct control over, but we have some recommendations in the safety action plan that we can build off of, trying to strike that delicate balance of enforcement, but also enforcement in a way that addresses equity concerns and things like that across the state in different communities. So, Emma.
Thank you for working on this. This is so important. And I feel like my brain's fading. So I'm just going to give my first initial response to these questions, knowing that there might be more to come later. With the areas, I think it's really important to not just consider intersections at street crossings, but concentration of driveway and access points. I think of so many stroads throughout the street where it's the urban highway, and then there's really small little lots and parcels that each have a driveway or multiple driveways, and there's tons of turning movements. So then people are trying to walk and bike and take transit. And so that unpredictable built environment creates a lot of conflicts. And then the lack of connectivity in the walking and biking network encourages a lot of people to walk and bike the wrong way and be even less predictable, because they're just trying to get to their destination, and the infrastructure from the network standpoint isn't supporting it. So a couple of things on my mind there. And then with regards to strategies, I know it's a tricky topic, but I think that distracted driving is really, really important. I feel like I've personally witnessed way more people driving down the street on their phone, not even looking at where they're going. And I'm like, no wonder crashes are increasing if we have people driving around in large vehicles that can do a lot of harm, but not paying attention to where they're going and what might be coming into the street at any moment. And then I also think about potential improvements through kind of the DMV side of things, and thinking about the book Right of Way by Angie Smith, Race, Class, and the Silent Epidemic of Pedestrian Deaths in America, and how she has some very specific recommendations and points out how the design of vehicles and different pieces that could be regulated at a state or a federal level are leading to the increase in pedestrian fatalities that we're seeing, and disproportionately impacting people of color and low-income individuals.
Yeah, and on that safer vehicles piece, Josh Roll, who's our sustainable and active transportation research coordinator, who led that equity work that referenced right in the beginning, is working with, I think, Heidi and some of the folks in our economist group on some research around that vehicle design and safety impacts area. So that's a place where we might not have a lot to go on for this initial take, but are hoping to learn more so that we can incorporate more in future rounds.
And I think there is a piece that the courts can play as well. I know that talking with the local court system, like there are repeat drivers. I think about my friend who I'm amazed that she's still with us today, because there was an 18-year-old driver who went through the windshield and like he'd already had issues before, but he's still out there driving. And there are a lot of people in our community who are driving when they really shouldn't be. And it'd be interesting to look at, like, what is that sliver of the population that's causing a lot more harm disproportionately? And is there a way to address and support those individuals to get around our communities in safe ways, because they need to be able to go places, but without killing or like risking other people's lives and well-being?
Beth, and I'm actually going to ask Mavis for a quick time check too. I'm like, because I think I might have used up all my time already and only gotten halfway through my stuff.
Okay, I'll just be quick while Mavis is looking, checking the time. I just want to say the last two speakers were in different ways saying, look at the bigger picture. And that's all, that's my comment. And I think you probably know that already, Jessica, but there's a lot more to all this than we think. I mean, for example, like Dell, it might be, or Dell's comments, it might be like, look at the popularity of those street races and figure out a way to direct them in not on city streets, for example, you know, something completely not having to do with ODOT. That's my comment.
Okay, you have 15 more minutes and I'm going to rattle off mine real quick and then it'll be back to you. So I'm all about giving people space to behave appropriately. So enforcing the rules we have a lot of rules. I really feel like they just need to be enforced instead of pushed to the side, like the distracted driving, speeding, all those things. At one point, your car could be taken if you're driving without a license. And I understand that there's a lot of reasons that those things have gone away, but there needs to be a stick in here somewhere. It is a privilege to drive. It is not a right. And so that in itself needs to be addressed. Next, enabling good behavior. Education should be required for ODOT. People working within ODOT, if you're not taking these how to be a great driver, then you don't need to be part of ODOT. If you are a new driver and you're not taking how to be a responsible driver, you don't need to be driving. If you are renewing your license and you aren't taking these how to be a good driver classes, then you don't need to be driving. So the bar needs to be raised, you know. And then space needs to be given for people to get around the complete streets, simplifying the system. It doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be a unified system. Right now, like we were talking about with our STIP, everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie when it's the same pie, and it needs to be baked into an entire vision instead of just like, oh, we want this and we want this. Isn't this pretty? Fabulous. Okay. And the last thing, when you're focusing on what can we do to make the whole system safer, the cars that are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that might need to be addressed. I mean, they don't fit on the road. And if you have a huge boat going down the road, which I drive one, thank you very kindly, I just had an oven in mine. It was wonderful. So, but that's not necessarily what we need to see happening. We need something that will fit in the space that we have, not, oh, we have such big cars, now we need to make the road bigger. That's not the way we need to be going. So, having said all that, you have 10 more minutes, go.
All right. So if you have any more thoughts on that vulnerable road user safety assessment, you know where to find me, and would love to chat with any of you more about that. The next stop on our tour is what the agenda calls the Ped Bike Safety Action Program. But like I said, we already have a PBS program and an SAP with our Ped Bike Strategic and our Strategic Action Plan. So we are looking for a new name for this program and your input. Been tentatively calling it our Vulnerable User Crash Response Program, because that's a little bit more descriptive. And this is for those of you who are new or want a little bit of a refresher on where this program is coming from. Back in 2021, there were 2 fatalities within 2 weeks at the same location on 82nd Avenue and Alberta. And that event was a little bit of a wake-up call for some folks, and resulted in the Oregon Transportation Commission advancing $10 million in our House Bill 2017 state safety priority funds for a one-time pilot to identify high priority from the stance of active vulnerable user crashes and equity considerations, high priority corridors where we would do systemic safety improvements that could be implemented within a year or less. So through that program, we were able to make improvements on TB Highway, 82nd Avenue, Lombard, and Highway 126 in Springfield. And had pretty good success in being able to identify some things we could do on that timeline. At the same time we were doing that pilot, we brought on a consultant team from HDR to do a third-party evaluation of our existing safety and active transportation programs, really focused on how can we incorporate active transportation safety more, how can we incorporate equity more, and how can we speed up our response and from when a crash happens to when we have improvements on the ground. And that is what we refer to as the EASY project, that consultant effort with HDR. They wrapped up a final report that included both crash data reporting improvements. So our crash analysis and reporting unit at headquarters is working on implementing those. It is mostly, we're doing less reporting around property damage only crashes involving vulnerable users, so that we can speed up when we get information and reports about crashes that involve serious injuries and fatalities with vulnerable users. We're also doing some switch from more of a paper-based system to let's get that stuff in digital format and not mess with the paper anymore. So we have a group that's working on that. And then this piece that we're talking about today is those program recommendations and the proposal for creating an ongoing rapid response program that is similar to that pilot we did in 2021. So in January, Mac Lind and Karen Criswell came to OBPAC, presented that initial proposal from the consultants, got feedback from OBPAC, made some changes to that proposal that they brought to OTC in March, and OTC approved reallocating all the remaining state safety priority funds we had for 24-27 that weren't being used for match for our All Roads Transportation Safety Program projects that are federally funded and require a local match, or weren't already programmed for another pedestrian and bicycle safety project those are being reallocated to this new program. That program is tasked with implementing the recommendations from that consultant evaluation and focusing on a pre-approved list of safety countermeasures that are already proven safety countermeasures being used by our All Roads Transportation Safety Program, but based on review from our project delivery staff and district maintenance managers, we felt could be implemented in a year in the right circumstances where we don't need right of way and things like that. A little bit of a tweak to the program since it came to OBPAC last time is we are now proposing a 2-track approach with these funds so that we have flexibility to address the need from different directions and adjust this program based on what we learn is most successful as we go along. And those 2 tracks are one, systemic, very similar to that pilot project, doing the number crunching, which we're going to do through our vulnerable road user safety assessment I just talked about, to identify those high priority locations and pick one of those corridors each year that we're going to try to do some systemic safety improvements on that rapid timeline. The second track is more of a responsive approach of there is a real desire from leadership and the OTC and the director that ODOT be consistently assessing vulnerable user fatalities when they happen on state highways to see if there's anything we can do in response to those as they occur. And so it's not just a vulnerable user is killed in inner Southeast Portland and that gets more media attention, so it gets more of a reaction. We want to be consistently evaluating these events and seeing what we can do no matter where in the state they occur on our system and no matter who's involved in that. That doesn't mean that we're going to be doing some sort of treatment like what's in the photo at every single location, because sometimes there are things that are, we have suicides unfortunately, that occur on our system. We have some things where, you know, the fix is just, there is a fix, but it's not something we can do in a year with those countermeasures. So we'll have to triage it to our longer term STIP programs. So we won't necessarily be doing something on the ground everywhere, but we will be consistently taking a look. So this graphic shows some examples of the types of quick turnaround, rapid response countermeasures that we think that we can implement through this program. And the bullet point list of the proposed process is otherwise unchanged from what we shared with you all back in January. So our next steps are to begin working with regions and our maintenance district staff to iron out the details that go in between these bullet points. Hell, lots of questions and opportunity for discussion involved in this that unfortunately I probably should have swapped these around so we had a little bit more time. So I'm going to go through all these questions and then just open it up for whatever folks want to respond to. Of first, what should we call this program? Then next, we've started developing a list of what are the criteria we want to use as consistent checks for what crashes do we give a deeper dive, take a deeper dive look at and try to do some sort of treatment on the ground. So would love the committee's thoughts on those. For the systemic track, we've got the 4 different criteria we used in the pilot to identify which corridors we want to focus on, and would love any thoughts on if there's additional lenses we should be looking at there beyond the 4 things we looked at before. And then also working with Heidi and the region traffic safety coordinators to try to incorporate education and enforcement as appropriate into this as well. And any thoughts on how we might do that effectively? So that's a lot with not very much time. So my apologies for running long. Beth.
Jessica, are you sharing your screen? Because I'm not seeing it. Is it just me?
I
I've
see
done
it.
this whole thing without the slides.
I've seen it.
I can see it.
I saw 'em.
I see it.
Okay, okay. Go on. I'll figure it
I'll
out.
stop sharing real quick and restart one sec, and maybe that'll kick it back in for you, Beth.
Okay, while we're waiting for you to do that, we really are almost out of time, but
Yeah.
Andre, do you have anything to say about this? Because you're the only one I haven't really heard of that sometimes says stuff.
I mean, I think it's awesome. I have some stuff to say during the next section. Actually, I got a lot to say during our next section. So, but I think Jessica, awesome, amazing work. It's actually like so inspiring. I'm like, oh, I want to do what Jessica does. I think if I was going to make a comment, I would say based on the presentation you gave about vulnerable road users, I think for the systemic track, it should be whatever is reducing, fatalities and injuries to serious to vulnerable road users. I think that adds up. So whatever gets the most bang for the buck to support that community.
Anyone else? We got time for one more.
I could chime in again. Putting these putting these things in the road to slow people down makes a certain amount of sense, but too often they cause risk to cyclists who they're supposed to be protecting. For instance, if you put a curb or even wands and stuff along a bike lane, and the bike lane has a bunch of debris in it, the biker is probably going to crash trying to get out of the bike lane. And the same for the barrels and stuff in the middle of the road. I mean, the bikers need to have some place to go if their lane's obstructed. And anyway, that's just another concern I have.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying focus on maintenance.
I think, yeah, I think, we're trying so hard to keep people out of the bike lane that it causes riders to be stuck in the bike lane and not able to get out of it in emergency situations. So that's also another factor.
All right. Jessica, any last thoughts before we go on to the next?
No, just I will be back talking about this program again also in the future. And if you have any thoughts or questions, put them in the chat or send me an email. And thanks for all your input.
Thank you. All right, member roundtable. Follow up with public comment.
I'd love to hop in and
Andre, is this you?
You'll give me some time, and I apologize just for the sake that it's 4:15 in the afternoon, and this may be a subject matter that's not super easy for people, but it's important to me, and I hope it's important to you all. So I'll dive in if that's cool. Great. Okay, so I just want to start off by welcoming Mike, Dave, and Nolan as well. And I just have some notes here. So I respect and appreciate all of you very, very much. And I think this is why I'm sort of comfortable enough addressing some concerns I have with our committee. And nothing I'm going to share is directed at any individual, but I am addressing a system of recurring underrepresentation and the continual exclusion and or absence of BIPOC communities in decision-making bodies across the state of Oregon, which we're here to represent. So I think my primary point for this whole spiel is that OBPAC has a diversity and inclusion problem. And this problem is not new to the state or the type of work we do. In fact, it's foundational to the identity of Oregon, which we have been appointed to represent. So from the Homestead Acts, originally just giving free land to the people that survive the walk, to Black exclusion laws during the constitutional sort of ratification of the state, to I-5 decimating Black neighborhoods in Portland, to light rail expansion and gentrification and beyond and beyond and beyond. So one sort of statement I like to sort of ground myself in, and perhaps ground us all in, is the concept of nothing about us without us. And this is a slogan used to communicate the idea that no policy should be decided by any representative without the full and direct participation of members of affected groups. I think the conversations we had today actually were quite serendipitous, because we kept hearing a recurring theme about low income and BIPOC communities being more likely to walk and take transit and concurrently experience traffic violence. And so if we're thinking about ourselves as a body who is committed to making Oregon a safer place to walk and bike, I think it would be important for us to have members of that community be foundational and participating in those conversations. We also know that BIPOC communities and pedestrians get stopped for less at crosswalks, or if cars do stop, they stop closer to their bodies, which I think is quite literally an act of violence. So taking all this into consideration, I guess my questions are, is this a place committed to welcoming and elevating the voices of BIPOC communities? What will OBPAC be doing to actively engage BIPOC participation? And what is OBPAC's commitment to not only creating, but maintaining a diverse committee? Personally, I have absolutely no interest in participating in spaces that aren't diverse and reflective of the array of beautiful cultures and cultural differences across our state. I experienced it in graduate school. I experience it regularly as a professional planner. I experience it as a board member, and I do not have any interest in experiencing it as a volunteer on this committee. So those are the questions I pose to you all, with love and appreciation for all of your work. And I will leave it there.
Thank you for your thoughts. I know that this is a subject that we have wrestled with a lot on this committee, and we had an individual that came through and she pulled us all aside and had conversation, and then she was supposed to circle back, and that has not happened. And that was a conversation we were actually having prior to this meeting, going, okay, so what's going on with this? Emma was kind of leading the charge on that, because as you're saying, that the vulnerable populations are key to the walking and biking, and exactly what you're expressing. And I don't know how we're going to shift from what we know to making it actually a functioning thing. And I'm going to lean very heavy on Leanne and Jessica for this, because we are trying to move forward, and we are trying to integrate all this, and through staff changes and all these other things, Andrea is right. We are kind of dropping the ball, and we don't want to shift it aside because there's just so many balls in the air. So I'm going to let you guys talk.
My take is that I think that this is probably because we're adding new members, but we're not really increasing the diversity of the committee. And I don't know if I can speak to that right now, although I would like to be able to research what that process was like and who our applicants were and all of that and all of those pieces, so that we can learn from that experience. And So I would like to say thank you very much, Andre. And I don't know if I have the information at this point to be able to speak intelligently about like where we're at and what the challenges were and how we can meet those challenges head on. I definitely can say that I would like to bring our ODOT's new social equity division, Office of Equity and Civil Rights. The head of that division came and spoke to this committee about a year ago, and we need to bring her back around. So my action item is to reach out to her and see if she can come in September. So that came up in the co-chairs meeting prior to this. None of these are reasons that like everything you're saying is absolutely true. So I don't want to say words to that to defend, but like the statement you said is true, full stop. And there are things that we can do, and I hope that we can learn and do them together. And I feel like I have a lot of catch up to do to be able to speak more about what's going on, and to be able to help do those action items that this committee wants staff to do to help support this work, because ODOT really does need a strong and diverse community for this committee in order to move forward with the work in a holistic way that's going to reach our friends and our family and our vulnerable and our road users. And so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I know that's not I feel like I'm not able to say anything that's helpful, but that's where I'm at, and I would love to work on this more with you all. Emma's hand is up. I also want to kind of give Jessica a moment if she has anything else to add, because I don't want to misrepresent anything. If I misrepresented anything, make sure that she cleans up my mess, but Emma's got her.
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure I responded to, since I was the staffer for the most recent, the most recent recruitment kind of happened in this weird juggling phase of staff. But also wanted to just say thank you, Andre, for trusting us enough to be vulnerable with this sort of feedback, because it's feedback we need. And we are in an interesting position with OBPAC because of it being like both a strength and a weakness of this committee is that it is created in statute with very specific representation requirements. And so I would love to have a conversation about how do we meet those requirements and find ways to expand representation or expand membership of the committee without tokenizing folks by giving certain folks voting seats and other folks ex officio seats. So that's been a thing I've struggled with, and I think I would love to commit to having more conversations about, do we actually just need to work with an elected official to propose statutory changes, and what can we do without just using the flexibility that we have to make good on those commitments as well. So yeah, I think that's all I've got right now, but
Let's go Emma, then Lauren, then Beth, or if whoever wants to facilitate. Sorry, I kind of jumped in, but we've got hands up. Emma, then Lauren, then Beth.
I still appreciate that we're making space for this, because when I went to the co-chair meet and greet of new members, I was a little surprised, because I thought I knew what our committee stood for in the committee health section of our work plan. And I think that while we do have some diversity represented, it's not in the BIPOC realm that is very poorly represented, and something is not working here at a system level. So I would love to, even if Erica doesn't come back, like I feel like she can play a certain role for the agency, but we need to be owning these questions and having these discussions as a committee, regardless of whether the agency is bringing staff into our committee or not. So I would like to request that there's space on the agenda next time, so we can all kind of think about this and then take ownership of like, how are we demonstrating our commitment and actively creating the committee that aligns with the values that we've stated. so that it's actually walking the walk and talking the talk. And thank you, Andre.
Biking the bike.
Exactly, biking the bike, rolling the mobility device, etc.
That. You're on mute.
Lauren, you can go if you want. Oh, wait, who am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Thank you, Andre. Thanks so much. I just have questions, and one is, are you feeling this is a systemic problem with OBPAC in how we do things, how things are done?
I think it's a systemic problem with the entire system that we exist within. So it's not OBPAC. I mean, it's a bigger. It started at the foundation of the state of Oregon, right? And so this is just it. This is just it playing out later. That is the byproduct of that. It's all these little things. It's people not ever saying what I'm saying to you all right now.
Yes.
You know? So this is me trying to. This is my attempt to like, hey, system, all you wonderful people, you are all wonderful people. We are still contributing to a system, and the system, we can't let it continue to reinforce itself. And maybe it will prevail. Maybe the conclusion will be, you know what? Oh, we couldn't get there. Andre stepping down from OBPAC because the system didn't get there, and it goes on, you know, for another 100 years. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, and then I wanted to also reiterate something you said, Andre, nothing about us without us. I haven't heard that before, and I love it. And so the other part is I'm not making any statements. I just am asking questions. Andre, when we talk next time, would you be interested in kind of making a list of how we as OBPAC members can not contribute to the system, stop this system? Would you like to do that?
I mean, I'm happy to hold a space for us to all have a conversation. I don't want to necessarily take on, because that's a recurring practice for people of color to sort of hold the thing and like, that's not my role. That's not, even this wasn't my role, but I care about you all, and I really care about the work we're doing, and I would like to see it move forward. But I think sort of, if we find it important that we want to address the concerns that I brought up, and if they're in the realm of being correctable or adjusted, then I'm happy to, you know, play a role in that conversation. And I want to acknowledge Jessica's comment as well.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're back to the fact that we are running out of time, which is the way we always end these meetings. So I want to acknowledge that we need to continue on the subject, because it has been why one of our past chairs stepped down, because she did not feel like she was being heard. And so if this is a recurrent issue, then we need to figure out at the root, why is it occurring, and why within the ODOT realm, not just within our community, but at this point, I really feel like we need an actionable item, because it is a subject that we have rehashed. And the fact is that I feel like our committee, we are out there fighting for vulnerable users because they bike and they walk and they use transit. So we need to bring more to the table. And I am unsure how to proceed, but we are building an agenda right now. So on our agenda, we have the STIP allegations already. We have vulnerable road user assessment update. So will that be you, Jessica, that we will be seeing again? Yes. And then land use issues, because right now, I personally, in my area, we have some beautiful stuff that can be turned into walking and biking mecca, but the people next to it are making it very difficult. So even though the county owns the land, they're making it so that this trail won't go in, even though they don't actually own that land. And so once again, the vulnerable users are losing out. So what else should be on our agenda, Bill? Can we have Erica back, or a plan of action?
From the staff, and I haven't reached out to Erica yet, but Jessica mentioned in the chat a scheduling issue that keeps happening with another meeting and the OBPAC meeting. So I will get back to you if she can come in September or November, but we're going to try to get her sooner rather than later. And what I'm hearing here is wanting a more, not a presentation, more of a discussion. So whether or not Erica can come back, I think that there immediately at the next meeting, there can be space and should be space here for that discussion. I also heard a desire to lead towards an action that we can start to move the needle.
We need an action because we have discussed. I feel like we very solidly, we have discussed. Now we need to do something.
And Lauren, your hand has gone up a couple of times, so I want to make sure that we get to you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, for the agenda building, we need to kind of wrap up our listening session that we did with our local BPACs. So maybe that can go on the agenda. What our priorities are, what we think our staff can do, your staff can do, that sort of thing. And then I just thought, I was on reading the bylaws during the meeting, multitasking. So maybe that's a place that we could start with, because there are certain demographics that we're supposed to be representing. And thank you also, Andre. I'm a very white Native American, enrolled Native American here. So you wouldn't see that, you know, part. We also have to look at the fact that we're only 8 people. So how do we do that? You know, when we were doing reviewing the applications, we were very, very set on making sure that people of different areas, you know, in different areas were being represented. So maybe it's more of an outreach, you know, that we've got to target and outreach to different communities and encourage them to apply as well. But as you said, we can talk about that later, but I did want to let you know that, you know, bylaws are up there on our website. Maybe that's a place that we could start.
Okay, do we have anything else to add to our agenda, Bill?
There is one thing, I guess it's not for September, but kind of on the topic. Had a conversation with one of Erica's staffers yesterday about getting Erica back for that check-in, and there is also now an Office of Social Equity and Civil Rights diversity, equity, inclusion training for advisory committees that office has developed and wants to start rolling out at the end of this year. Probably not going to be ready for September, but is something to add to the November or January agenda build.
Okay, anything else for our agenda, Bill? Anything specific? Okay, I'm sure something will come up. We are 1 minute over time. Any last comments? Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for carrying the banner and fighting the fight. And I'm sure that we will all be in contact via, and then we will see you in September.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, bye.